Welcome to the Franklin Historic Zoning Commission's Design Review Committee meeting of September the 19th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The DRC is the subcommittee of historic zoning. The meeting is informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or COA for projects within the city's historic district guidelines. In light of those guidelines, applicant participation in DRC is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice, but the DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, which is the Historic Zoning Commission. There are 7 items on the afternoon's agenda. When the item is called, please introduce yourself and generally describe your item. Please focus on specific points of your project that you want DRC to discuss. All right, we're ready for the first item, which is discussion of alterations to previously approved new construction accessory structure at 215 at Lewisburg Avenue. David Sills, the applicant. Ms. Rose.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I did want to invite Mr. Steele and Ms. Alfrey, you can go ahead and go on up, from the project at 215 Lewisburg Avenue to come forward and for the staff to give an update on the status of that project. There have been a couple of questions regarding the approved scope of work as related to what you see on site. This is an accessory structure that was approved by the Historic Zoning Commission earlier this year. And you can see on the screen here, the building that you see in the background is on the neighboring property. The construction was approved, as I mentioned, and a stop work order was placed on the property due to the concerns about the height of the structure in relation to the principal structure on the site. The Historic Zoning Commission approved this garage at a height of 20 feet or 1 foot 8 inches shorter than the overall house ridge. Upon investigation, it appears there may have been some miscommunication, and we, as staff, visited the site to meet with the contractor to talk about it last week. In having that discussion, we found that there was no grading benchmark established. The architect did provide that the house was 20 feet at the point where he measured, but our building official also measured the building and found that the house is also 22 feet and a few inches tall at a different location on the site. The staff measured that house, and I believe that corner, if you recall, Mark, that 22 feet was at the opposite side of the building from the front corner. The garage was originally designed, as you all may recall, to be positioned further back on the property. So the Historic Zoning Commission had received some requests from the neighbor and had discussion and did request that the architect plan to move the garage closer to the rear of the house for a more typical configuration, which the applicant did honor. And the house, the subject property is just here. So I'm going to scroll through the photos a little bit. Here's the house in relation to the garage. It was planned to be a good 30 feet back or so from this location where it is currently, and the commission asked as part of the approval that it move forward. In doing that, we do not believe as staff that the change in grade was considered, and so when it was planned to be at the back of the site at a lower grade, it was planned to feel lower than it does now, being closer to the house where it's a higher grade. Part of the current perceived height has been created by excavation undertaken to build the foundation and establish the finished floor elevation. The tallest part of the building is on the left elevation. So you can see the neighboring property to the far right, and you can see where the property's been excavated to build the foundation, the monolithic slab, and then the finished floor is actually at the near the line that you see drawn here. And if you can't see that line, then it's just below the top of this piece of wood here. This is the tallest part of the building, and with the grade being filled in and the discussions that staff had with the contractor about how that grade can be filled in to achieve positive drainage and avoid any runoff onto the neighbor's property, the grade can be filled in to follow generally what you see here with this piece of wood and fall off 6 inches to mitigate the perceived height. And if that were to take place, then the exposed height of this facade would be around 20 feet 4 inches, which is much closer to the approval that the Historic Zoning Commission set. This is the facade that has the most exposure. The front also has exposure, and that is to be mitigated in the same respect, with the floor, the finished floor being lower than the grade on the outside. So it doesn't actually require that the building be reframed in any way, but it would mitigate the exposed and perceived height of the building through the fill. Of course, all this said, the owner will be required to work with the City of Franklin to ensure this happens and also provide an engineered report to demonstrate that the building, by having the grade added to it in this way, could be treated so that it's not consequential to the building at a later date with the water exposure, et cetera. So this, we believe, would mitigate the height issues. Again, it would be changing the height as it appears from the exterior, not necessarily from the interior, but the floor level will be compensated so that the doors will actually sit where the fill is, and there'll be a landing built on the inside so that it will address the interior floor elevation. Does anyone have any questions about this?
Yeah, tell me what the height of the house is, again.
At a couple of different locations, it varies. I believe, if I recall correctly, that Mr. Tosh told me that it measures 22 feet and a few inches at one side of the building, and then it was around 21 on the other side. What you're going to see at this elevation you see on the screen is, if filled, the height will be anywhere between 20 feet and 20 feet 4 inches exposed. So we believe this will meet the intent of the commission's approval, so it will be closer to 1 foot 8 inches shorter than the house at the tallest part of the house and at the tallest part of the garage.
Okay, talk about the engineer's report. Well, I didn't understand. What is that for?
I would invite if you're ready to invite the applicant to come forward. What we understand is that because this is built from frame and not from, entirely from concrete construction or masonry construction at the bottom, that adding the grade to this location could be consequential to the building if there are not steps planned ahead of time to waterproof it so that the fill will not cause moisture problems in the framing at a later date. Is that fair to say, Mark?
That's correct. So the 2018 IRC doesn't allow for grade to come up within 6 inches of framing or sheathing. And so by putting this up on that framed wall, which is not a block wall, obviously, that's where the engineered design comes into play. And Mr. Still was informed that he'd have to provide an engineered design for that and also have the engineer inspect the application and installation of that design to make sure it met his recommendations.
Okay.
And the code gives latitude for an engineered design for something outside the scope of the...
So is that something that needs to come back to the full commission, or does that, you'll work that through the staff?
It will just be required for staff in order to allow the project to move forward through, I believe, to pass an inspection moving forward, correct?
It would be required to get the stop work order lifted.
Okay. Mr. Seal?
What they're talking about on that part is just to make sure that I have masonry below the ground. Everything below the the 2x4 that was leaned on the side there would then become masonry, so there would be no water intrusion.
So where does the water go?
Well, the water will go around the building.
Okay,
And
all right,
come,
all
come
right.
out on the front side. But the block will be built up to meet the grade on the back side of the house, so there'll be nothing but masonry underground
Okay, all
to
right.
indicate that.
Any other comments
Uh,
on the
I think-
height or anything?
I think Amanda covered most of it pretty well. Like I said, on the upper side of the building where they're at, we'll bring it down to 20 foot on that side. And then what happened is the grade of the lot slopes sharply across through there. And so when you start trying to get grade, you've got 3 different places to get grade, and then on the house, you've got 3 different places to get grade. And because the lot slopes so much, you know, it depends on where you pull your grade from to end up with your final grade.
So for future projects of this type, what we are working on internally is establishing a means to get a foundation height survey. So there'll be an established point or benchmark at which the grade will be measured in relation to principal or accessory building or new infill principal building in relation to a neighboring principal building.
For
This-
future projects?
for future projects. It's rare that we have grade that changes this sharply on a property, so we haven't had this issue come up very often, but we do believe that this mitigation will achieve the intent of the commission's approval, and we also believe that we've learned some things that will allow us to forego this type of issue in the future.
Okay. Comments, questions from the commissioners?
I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand why we're here. So, what's the grade if it were pre-excavation where this building is? What's the for the garage, the existing grade before it was excavated to the top of the garage? What would that number have been?
Right now, it'd be about 20 feet 4 inches.
So this backfilling of the grade, we're not adding extra grade to get the building down in height.
A lot of what you're seeing is actually the height feeling much larger because of the excavation, but the finished floor is intended to be at finished grade level.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and so they are back because, have they built the building too tall? From what we approved? I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
trying to get-
It is technically yes, but a lot of that is because of the exposed level that you see on that photograph
Mm-hmm.
and not understanding what the intent for the fill is. And so bringing in the fill to that degree will compensate to make the perceived height of the building from the back of this principal structure at the height that was approved by the commission.
Okay, so, and that's pre-excavation grade is what we're talking about, the 20.4 inches. So they're not adding extra fill on the side of the building before pre-excavation grade. See what I mean?
Go ahead, Mr. Still.
If Amanda will go back 2 or 3 slides.
Yeah.
Where they're standing on the back side of the building, you can see the original grade there. One more, I believe.
I think you're referring to the photograph I had up.
There was the one that you had right there.
Right there.
Yeah,
See, that's the original grade on the back side of the
Okay.
building. And that's staying right with the original grade. The fence
So-
is right behind that.
right. So I'm just trying to understand what's being asked of us. Is if it's going to ultimately, once the fill is put in, going to be built at the height we approved, is that really more of a codes issue with respect to this, the way it's constructed, not having a block wall coming up to?
It is a code issue for that, and we will work through it. The reason it's here today is because there were some questions, and we wanted to make sure that we made it transparent to everyone that we were working to address that.
Okay.
That the building wasn't necessarily intended to circumvent the commission's approval in any way, and that we are working toward a resolution so that the neighboring properties will only feel the perceived height of what the commission had approved.
Okay.
technically, the building is taller because part of it will be underground, but what is above ground would be the 20 feet.
Okay.
And the pedestrian door, the access door will be at finished grade and not below it.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, this is what it seems like happened to me, is we approved the building and then said, move it back,
Move it up.
move it up, excuse me, yes. And then the
grade change.
amendments were never made
Exactly.
to make it comply with what we approved, and so now this is a contemplated correction.
Yes, short of having the building completely disassembled and reframed, that is which we would like to try to avoid. That is the mitigation we propose. So if everyone feels comfortable with that, then that is how we'll address that issue, because there was a miscommunication. We did not realize that wasn't contemplated when the building was moved forward on the site.
But still, when we're all said and done, the accessory structure will be a foot plus lower than the main structure.
Yes, at that tallest point of the principal structure versus the tallest point of the accessory structure, yes.
What will it be at the lowest point of the principal structure versus the,
21, is that right?
It'll be, yeah, probably 21 on the low side and then 20 on the low side of the building right there.
Wait a
So
minute,
it's-
20, I thought it was 20, of the main house
Yeah,
is 21 on one side and 23 on the other, is that what I?
So 22 and a few inches on one
Okay.
side.
Okay, and this structure, accessory structure, is 20 foot, 4 inches, right?
Or 20 foot if he will.
20 feet,
yeah.
Yes, if he grades appropriately, yes.
okay.
So the lowest point of the house in relation to the garage is probably within inches.
Any other comments?
I was just gonna say, I mean, it looks to me like they did everything we asked them to do. You know, you gotta dig a hole. And I think that's what Josh was getting at was, well, if they're not done, I understand there's a code issue in terms of the framing below grade.
Yeah.
But that's a codes question, not historic zoning. And, you know, the other thing about establishing heights for future projects, I just want to be careful that we're not creating some situation where lay people can't go out there. You know, you got to hire a surveyor, and that takes time, and, you know, surveyors 2 months out and cost $1,200. It's like, well, if it's something that people can go out and measure themselves, and you know, different jurisdictions that I've worked in average 4 corners, and they'll average 4 corners of the building you're building to, and that seems like something lay people can go out with a tape measure or a cheap laser from Home Depot. I just don't want to get into the habit of creating obstacles for people that are convenient for us but really hard for them. Does that make sense? And maybe it's not. That's just
Well,
me
I think
talking.
the biggest thing was with the movement of the building from setback as far as it was originally, the accessory building. And then we all said, move it up.
Yeah,
that-
we told them to do that,
Yeah.
and then we approved it.
Yeah.
so
So I'm not sure why they're here. Like I
that goes
said.
to my point, like, is there anything we're going to be asked to be approving on this? Because,
But I think the perception now is that the size, pulling it up, really made a difference, and that's.
I think it did. I mean, I
made a
noticed
difference.
it, I noticed it when I drove down Lewisburg Pike
Yep,
the other
yep,
day.
yep, yep.
So the stop work order was placed because it is technically taller than what was approved, but we wanted to understand the intent for the finished grade manipulation because the finished floor is, in the foundation construction, is not typical of what you would have if you have that much grade built up on it. It's frame, it's not, there's not block at the bottom, so.
What was the approved height?
It was 20 feet for the garage. And like everyone's noted, moving it forward, that was not something that the architect compensated, and we did not ask any additional questions on it. So I think it was just a big misunderstanding. I agree with Tyler that this is not something that's likely to happen very often.
No.
And we certainly want to make everyone feel comfortable, including the neighbors on either side, who are the ones that asked some questions about this, that everything is going the way that it it was intended to go by the contractor, and that the questions that staff had to ensure that the intent of the approval by the Historic Zoning Commission was honored have been addressed, and we've mitigated to the degree that we feel necessary in order to ensure that.
And is part of the reason here that we don't have a block foundation, because you're always, I mean, I'm not a contractor, so I can't say this for sure, but normally what I've seen is you would excavate to put your foundation in anyway. So you're never going to start building at existing grade. You're always going to excavate to put your foundation in. And are we measuring from finished, like the current pre-excavation grade? Are we measuring from where it's excavated? Because that's what I keep coming back to. Like if at excavation, pre-excavation grade, the building is going to be 20 feet or 20 feet 4 inches, whatever we approved. That to me seems like maybe this is coming up because it's not a block foundation. It would be unusual to backfill against the framing.
Yes, and that's part of the reason we had concerns, is because I don't believe that the contractor intended to fill in to the degree that is necessary in order to ensure that the height meets
Which
the-
would have resulted in a much taller building than we had
Absolutely.
approved. I mean,
So it's not that the city put a stop work order unnecessarily. I certainly want
Sure.
to assure you that's not the case. But it is certainly one where there was some miscommunication between the architect, the contractor, and the city staff. And we do believe this will help
And so does
mitigate
it,
that to meet the intent of the commission's approval.
right, so does it need to come back before us because it's 20 feet 4 inches and we approved 20 feet?
I believe Mr. Still plans to try to get to that 20-foot mark. I
Okay.
typically don't bring things back to the commission if it's just a matter of inches in the field, unless it's something where it creates a condition where a building's actually taller than the principal structure, for example. But in this case, we just wanted this to be more of a report, and I also put it on the agenda in the case that last week, if we didn't arrive at a resolution, that the applicant could speak to the proposal and ask for any changes if necessary. So this was a precautionary kind of adding to the agenda just to make sure if the applicant needed to ask for changes, they could, because I put the agenda out a week early. But we believe we've addressed it.
And I believe that we have generally, as a commission, been clear, about if the grade was different or something, to consider all that before it was approved and built. But,
We didn't.
this was just a situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll ask for grade to be measured at different points on principal structures in the future, if we do choose to forgo a foundation height surveys. That way we can understand how the building relates to the fall or rise in a property, and how that would be consequential to any new construction behind it.
Well, it sounds like city staff and the applicant have worked together to come up with a solution
Yes.
in response to the questions. So, any other comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready for our next item, discussion of alterations, roof lines, principal structure, and demolition and new construction at 724 Fair Street. Mr. Coffey. Man, did you have any opening comments on this one, or?
Sure, I can add a couple of comments. So the applicant is proposing to make a couple of requests. One is to change a roof line at the rear of the structure. The other is to build a new accessory structure at the rear of the property. The property currently has two. And I did share some information with the applicant last week, but I'll go ahead and let Kevin speak to the proposal, and then I can finish with some comments. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Coffey.
Is it on? Okay. Let's talk, if you don't mind, Amanda, about the roof change on the main house first. I think it's a little more of a compact item.
And just to make sure everyone's in the room's familiar, this is the Petway Brown House on Fair Street.
Right.
Okay.
So I guess you noticed that it lost its porch this last week.
I had
Now
not
there's a
seen
partial porch that's back. And I will tell you frankly, we kind of saw it without the porch and we thought, man, this thing really looks good without the porch, but we're not going to go there. So on the existing house, there was a porch with a shed roof that was at one time enclosed. And we don't know quite the vintage of that. If you follow Sanborn maps on this house, they are all over the place. There were pieces and parts that were there and then gone, and then overlapping something else and then gone. So it's a little difficult to trace. But we have a couple of basic situations with that porch. The first being that it's framed with 2x4s, and I think they're at 2 feet on center, which is not crazy for vintages from the late 1800s to mid 1900s on something like that. The part that is really strange about them is that they're not really sitting on anything. They're kind of forming a truss, and they are sitting with gravity against the back wall of the house. They're not really connected to it except in very small points. So the offshoot of that is it's not safe, it's not good construction, probably never was that good. So that's one issue we have with it. The other is that a 2x4 frame will not even come close to getting us the depth that we need to meet code with insulation in that room. It'll require either 2x6s with a fur down to get that, or 2x8 construction back there. So the offshoot of that is that we're basically reframing that porch. So we get into I know we've had this discussion before on other projects. Do you go in there and do you marry 2x8s next to or in between the existing 2x4s? Are they that sacred to leave in there? Or is it a better move to just kind of reframe the roof? The other issue we have is that the bearing on those right now is a little over 7 feet. So they're quite low, I think maybe 7.4 at the most. And then if you use the 2x8 framing instead of 2x4, you're getting lower, whether that's 6.11 or 7.0, you're in that neighborhood. Starts to compete with window head heights and things like that. So one other issue that's always been something with this house is that porch roof causes a really nasty little joint where it hits the other addition of the house, and it comes in under another eave and causes, for lack of a better description, a little triangle in there of no return. So what we were hoping to do was kind of solve all the problems at once and kind of raise that porch roof to a lower pitch and get the eave height of it closer to the other addition on the back, which we, got approved before. Just slightly changing, just to get the pitch we need, kind of minimum pitch for the roof, just slightly changing the height of the porch at the house, but giving it a point that we can actually attach to there. So there's kind of a number of issues. Obviously, the owners would love to have more headroom in the space as well, and I'm not going to pretend that that's not an issue, but having a 9-foot ceiling in that space, having a space above it where we can put ductwork and insulation and things like that is also attractive. So that's kind of our, that's kind of one thing we wanted to throw in front of you to see what your thoughts were. We know that we're changing the shape of a historic item, but that item never has really lived in the way it was originally designed anyway, as an open porch. And the other aspect of it is that it's at the back of the property. You can just see barely back left where that shed is. So I don't think we're really changing kind of the historic mass of the house by doing it. So that's issue number one.
May I comment on this issue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the Historic District Design Guidelines do recognize that roof shapes are very significant to the character of a building, but recognize that alterations to roof lines would be appropriate if not highly visible from street view. As you can see on the Google Map street view here, you can see it at a certain angle. I had to find what angle you could actually see it. Approaching in a vehicle in either direction, you're not going to see it. If you sit it the right way, you can slightly see it, but the degree at which the applicant's proposing to change that slope is minimal enough that I believe or the planning staff believes that it wouldn't be consequential to the building and would support that part of the request.
Let's take these one at a time. Let's deal with this one before we get into the next piece.
Sure.
What's the step in on that addition? It looks like it sits in
It's,
on that back part.
it's minimal. It really is very close to the same surface as the brick because it was originally a porch. So if you can imagine, there, originally was a porch column that probably set flush with the back corner of the brick. So it's really in the same plane, but that's kind of the cards we were dealt on that.
Okay, I got you now.
Yeah.
I see it now.
All of that electrical, the meter and stuff
Yeah.
is kind of distracting from that, but that's pretty much the issue there is that it's flush.
From what I can tell, the siding might actually cause it to stick out,
Yeah.
less than an inch from the wall. It's built on the same plane.
What is the plan with the siding? Is it wood siding?
It's wood siding and we're replacing it in kind. We have some areas, other places on the house where it was rotting and we're basically going back and replacing it in kind, so.
So would your new proposal have a step in, so it's not flush on the side?
No, it would still be flush on the side. We're not messing with the plane because the floor system, such as it is already out there. It would be very odd to pull it back in, and there's a fairly substantial foundation under there that we really don't want to mess with. So
They're keeping the wall in place.
yeah, I think it makes sense to leave it where it is.
So you have the original flooring then, and then the stone foundation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's visible from the street will not change?
Not really, I don't think anyone would ever notice the difference. That slope up there is getting a little less.
Roughly, Lisa, you'll see where my cursor is. It
Yeah.
just brings the slope out slightly. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
So are you going like from an 8-12 to like a 4-12?
Oh, it's not an 8-12, it's more like I'm gonna guess 6-12 the way it is right now, and we're probably going to a 4-12. And the minimum we would go is probably 3.5, 12 on that. This was sketch form, but when I technically get in there, 3.5 is probably the lowest I would go. The other kind of consequence to it as well, it's something that's been driving the owner crazy, is that the slope on that porch is different than the shed that's behind it, that's existing. This would bring them closer in line, and that's not necessarily a historic issue, but an aesthetic. And I think it's just, most people would never see that, but we've got an interior designer who's trained that's working on this one, and it's driving him crazy, so I totally understand that.
Any other comments? Okay, let's go to the second part then, Kevin.
This is the fun one, because I have to have a difficult one. So at present, there are two accessory structures. One is a smokehouse that's about 150 square feet, and that's to the back left of the property. That is staying that's actually a truly historical outbuilding that we can trace, so we kind of know what that is, and we like it, so that stays. The other one is a shed that's kind of to the back right of the property. And I think it's, I'm gonna say, if I remember right, 360 square feet, somewhere in that. There is no foundation, it's a dirt floor. It's just built with timbers. You can kind of see there that it's seen its better days. And it's old, but it's not super old. So what we can say about it is we can trace it, we think, between 1908 and like 1950, which is kind of a broad range. And the reason it's broad like that is Sanborn shows some structures back there, but they never really show one exactly where that is. Now, they had a structure on one map that was similar, and they could have just misplaced it, but that was a little unlike the Sanborn maps. They were usually pretty accurate. So we know for sure from the maps up to the early 1900s that that was not there in that place. There was a series of other buildings that ran along the right side of the property. Some of them all the way into that flood zone that's depressed. They had quite a complex back there. So the short of it is that we would like to demo that building and put a garage structure there. So I understand this one might be a difficult one for some people. And originally, my full intent was we should save that building, but it's in pretty bad shape. And I've seen some stuff that's in pretty bad shape, and this one's down there. The poplar that's on the outside, you can definitely tell. We could probably get somebody to age it if we had to. But again, poplar really wasn't there to last forever. It does have a nice patina on it, and we would like to reuse some of it. So that's the first part of this sticky situation, is we would like to demo that shed. And I would encourage you guys to brave the job site and go back there and actually look in, and you can agree with me or disagree with me or whatever you feel, but at least put eyes on it. Noel Jones is the contractor, and he's there a lot, so I'm sure he'd be happy to give you a tour. Some of you would probably be intrepid enough to actually walk in. That's good. I didn't get very far in.
I want to jump in and say the city would encourage you to enter the site. If you'd like to have a site visit after we finish this discussion, let me know, and I'll be happy to set that up so that we can make sure that it's publicly noticed and that everyone can go together and have discussion. But to Kevin's point, reviewing demolition requests are things sometimes that require a site visit so you can feel more comfortable understanding the conditions.
And do you have any photographs of the interior of that building?
I do, actually, on my phone. I'll be happy to send those to Amanda.
At some point.
Yeah,
that'll be-
obviously, at some point, you guys will need to see those. But it's basically open air through there. And the dirt floor slopes away from you. Obviously, there's floodplain behind it, which is kind of the next issue. But it is not an enclosed structure, really. So it's basically just poplar timbers and poplar framing.
What's the roof material?
The roof is an asphalt shingle, and I had heard comments about people thinking the roof was really charming, but it's asphalt shingle, and those are galvanized pieces of metal at the ridges. Pretty common. So, and who knows at what point they did that, but that is not like a really old occurrence. So asphalt shingles would date it to probably the 50s, maybe a little earlier.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to speak to the demolition request
Yeah.
now? Okay, so as Mr. Coffey mentioned, he estimates it was built between 1908 and 1950. And part of the reason for that is the dates of the Sanborn maps that we have in our possession or have access to for the city of Franklin. The last Sanborn mapping was completed in 1950s, and the review of those maps indicates that, like Kevin said, there is a structure that looks like it's around the same size, but it's not in the same location. So it's either an error on the mapping, or it is likely another building that was there at some point and torn down, or it was relocated. I would suggest it was not relocated, but rather something was torn down and built new. It does appear to be older, but it doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily something that staff feels comfortable recommending for demolition based on lack of architectural integrity or historical integrity. The Historic District Design Guidelines would recommend that an applicant provide documentation to meet one or more of the criteria by which the commission considers demolition, one of which is not historic in age, which we've determined that it could be historic in age, that it is not architecturally significant, or that it's not structurally stable, at which it would be requested that an applicant provide a report from an architect or structural engineer that indicates that it cannot be salvaged in place. One of the complications with this project is that this is in the floodplain. So if this building were to be saved in place, it would have to be done so to meet floodplain construction standards. It wouldn't have to be elevated. I know you're all used to seeing applications for elevation. That's for principal buildings. For an accessory, it would just need to be unfinished and be able to be vented so that the water could go through it. That would be the case for any new construction on the site at that location, whether it's a new garage or the existing garage. So staff would recommend that if you're interested in the site visit, we can certainly do that, but we would request that the applicant consider providing a structural engineer's report to talk about the stability of the site, or the building, rather.
Okay, comments?
Yeah, I'll go. I think we've recently had a similar type of request, Kevin, and so I would just say, look closely at what's required in the ordinance to get that demolition piece done, because, it sounds like everything I've heard, it is historic. We're getting closer to my age being historic every day, unfortunately, for better or worse. Not quite there yet, but getting close. So, I've not heard anything kind of bumping up on that in the estimation, so it does seem like there's no evidence that it's not historic at this point, and I would just say, look closely at what's required to try to hit the bar on that, if that is something the applicant feels is justified, because I feel like we as a commission there are these standards we have to live by, and we need to be doing that. And so that's my advice, is just in my reaction on this, is I would look closely at what's required to support a demolition application, because that's been kind of a hot button issue recently.
Sure.
So,
Others?
Simply that the engineering report, I think, is a priority for the commission, an independent engineering report
Sure.
that can be relied upon.
yeah. And that addresses the criteria set forth in the code.
Right.
Any other comments?
I have a comment. So, there's some way to save part of the building and have the use that you need and give homage to the overall structure, because it is historic regardless if it was in 1908
Oh, sure.
or 1950.
I'm sure there's a way. That was something that we had talked about a little earlier in the process. My thought was, if it was just saving some of the boards, that really wasn't like doing it justice, but I think there might be a way to approach that. I haven't thought about that super seriously at this point. This is kind of a first blush effort. I think the question to me about the historical nature of it is if this was behind some houses that were the similar vintage to what the outbuilding was, and they kind of lived together and told that story, I would definitely understand why people would stand for the idea that that needed to be saved. But I do know that this building is not part of, the first half century of story of this place. And there was a large complex of buildings that had to do with the owner's occupation earlier, and then this just seems to be like maybe it had livestock in it at one time. I know they had horses there at one time, but probably not in this building, but maybe. Or a storage building. So to me, that purpose of that building doesn't lift to quite the same level. But yeah, everything's on the table at this point, definitely. We want to look at all of it.
So I guess you mentioned storage of when you have horses or whatever, so do you have a sense of what it was used for before? Or?
I wish Aaron was here because he's done a ton of research on that, but there was a large complex of buildings, and I know some of them had like an agricultural or, the purpose for housing animals, as well as shop space. And yeah, the Sanborn maps are crazy to look at because, usually you can weave together the story, and this one's a little tougher to do than usual. But yeah, we'll certainly, whatever we know about that, we'll relay that information. I'll get with Aaron and we'll kind of compile some of the high points to kind of weave that story together.
So Kevin, I think you've been down this road with us before on the demolition issues, but.
I don't remember.
You- I remember one or two. But anyway, I think you know what we need in order to justify any kind of an approval of a demolition. And I think that's, include the engineer's report and strong photographs
Right.
of it. And that, and versus trying to rehab it. And
Sure.
so I think that's my sense of where this group would at least want to see.
Yeah, totally understand.
Well, Mr. Chair, the other thing, and I'm going, okay, so if this building were approved for demolition, where does it really put the property owner a building in a flood area?
So we can
Yes.
pivot to that discussion. I did want to note, I've spent a lot of time with my colleagues in engineering and parks on some of the projects you're about to hear about. And one thing that they've learned from me is that changes over time do have significance potentially. So this building is a very minimum 70-something years old. And it's really important for precedent setting and for, just the commission doing, the requisite research that we have all the information that's requested in the design guidelines. So I definitely support, requesting that report. Is this something that the commission would like for staff to schedule a site visit for with the applicant?
I'd recommend that. I mean, I have been in this building in the past, and I think it would be beneficial for the commissioners to see it. Just a little history that may pertain to it. So Dr. Alexi Brown bought this building and the entire property in 1939, and he was a veterinarian. So, I mean, it could have been a place he brought a sick animal back to. I mean, I don't know. And according, as you say, the Sanborn maps from 1928, they don't quite show a building in that configuration.
Not at all.
But as Ms. Rose points out, it is still a historic building. I think it'd be beneficial for a site visit.
My only comment to that would be is as far as getting the cart ahead of the horse, no pun intended, but I do think if the reason for the site visit is consideration of demolition, I think perhaps it would be helpful to have whatever engineering report, if one's gonna be submitted in advance of that.
I think that's a good point, to do that. And also some idea, if it was to be demolished, as to what's going to go back there and what implications, because it's, I mean, just next door, we just last week approved an exclusion for them to keep them from having to raise that house, that little yellow house. So, because of the requirements there. So it would be nice to know some idea of what you're talking about putting back in. I guess that's it. And what implications you got in that flood zone.
So just to help frame that discussion a little bit, the Historic District Design Guidelines and the zoning ordinance would both come into play for this. Per the Historic District Design Guidelines, accessory structures should be designed so that an upper level measures no more than 60% of the footprint of the lower level. And also that the scale relationship be the same or less than the principal structure. So a 1.5 could be supported, but we would need to understand that the footprint is 60% or less of the footprint on the bottom floor. And part of the reason for that guideline is it's intended to reinforce a 1.5 story scale and to lessen mass on an upper floor. One thing to consider as far as the zoning goes is that residential lots may have up to one accessory and one minor accessory. Mr. Coffey mentioned the other building on the property is measuring about 150 square feet, which is great because that means that that building can stay and be classified as a minor accessory structure and would allow for a new building if the commission were to approve demolition of the existing one. The building that you see here would also need to measure no more than 50% of the footprint of the principal building, and because it's in the floodplain, the structure would need to remain unfinished both on the bottom floor and the top floor. And the only use for it, as far as I recall, would be that it could park vehicles and it could be used for storage, but it would not be for any sort of habitational use.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask one more question.
Sure.
You mentioned that in the beginning, you kind of had the idea of saving that building. That was kind of, did you ever come up with any plans for actually converting that building into a garage? And
We
keeping
didn't.
that form?
We didn't. The size of it really just is not conducive to actually putting a car in it, which is kind of the main purpose. So we kind of moved on from that. If you look at the site plan, you can see kind of where the shed is in relationship to the footprint that we just put down here. And so the depth isn't even, deep enough for a car to get in, a smart car maybe, golf cart. So that's kind of the guide there. And one thing as well is we had a meeting a couple weeks ago. We just sketched this thing out very quickly as kind of an idea with the basic program of getting 3 cars on a storage area above it. So I would even say from the time we did this and then we got more information about the flood area, we probably would not do that dormer like all the way across. This would, maybe there'd be a smaller one, but we would just do that for a little bit of light up there. So I don't think it would, originally we thought we were going to be able to use the function upstairs. And then when we got the determination that it all had to remain unfinished, that would change the language of the garage a little bit. But this is the sketch that we came up with. And the idea on this being that it's, set back 30 feet, about 30 feet behind the house. Obviously, we have some floodplain issues. And I have yet to get the final floodplain map, and I don't know if it's even out there yet. I assume that it is, but I don't know for sure to know exactly where that line is. But it used to basically cut right through the corner of the main house. Supposedly it's going to be behind that now. but this will still likely remain in it, I'm pretty sure, because it's several feet below. So our main approach would be to take that grade, raise it so you can get the car in there, and then obviously on the back side of that, it would be a little taller on the back side. So there's some steps that we have to take, also zoning-wise, to get it through approvals for it being in the flood zone. So it's, as usual, a juggling act.
So perhaps after you go through all of that process, it might behoove us to have a site visit.
Yes, the timing of that site visit, I'll kind of leave that up to you. I would say the difficulty for us is that if you don't feel like demolition is an option, we're kind of back to the drawing board anyway, so.
Well, I mean,
know
I think you've
that's
heard us
22.
enough on demolition to know we just have to be able to justify it based on the criteria that we've got before us in these guidelines. So I'm not saying that we're going to frown on it until we see the justification.
Understand.
So assuming we can justify it,
Right,
and assuming we see what you want to put there, then it might behoove us to have a site visit
okay.
to really move it forward.
All right.
And that doesn't have to, that can be done before, I mean, I don't know what your timetable is, what you're thinking about, but you've got enough going on with the house, so it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it could be sometime in October or November even, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
So to understand the comments that we've received, is it my understanding that the committee would like to see a structural engineer's report
Yeah.
prior to the site visit?
Yeah.
Okay,
All of the
so,
preparation Kevin and the applicant need to
okay.
justify us coming out to a site visit.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure because that will come into play as to when we would be able
Yeah.
to schedule a site visit.
Could I also interject too? I think it would be beneficial if you would show us more development of what the sketch here is and look at that option as well before a site visit as well, so possibly another DRC meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. And did you say it's a one-car garage or a two-car that you intended?
It's 3 bays.
Potentially 3 bays.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, three.
We're still, again, we're kind of raising this up the flagpole. We could end up with 2 cars and just a little storage area. We're thinking about the 3rd bay as really being more lawnmower, golf cart type size. So it's really 2 cars and another vehicle.
And so where would the driveway be?
There's a site plan. So in this view, the drive would be from the back deck that's already been approved, or the carport, back to the garage door with a wall to the right side to mediate where the flood area, the change of grade currently is. Steps going down to hit that grade. So basically forming kind of a carport or courtyard back there with some guest parking. Driveway would remain exactly where it is now.
Okay.
And at least in a preliminary thought, we're thinking of that as being gravel instead of hardscape. But
So
that's
it-
kind of our rough plan.
Yeah, and this hasn't been vetted through the entire city team. The floodplain administrator would likely comment that gravel would not be an acceptable fill, what it would be considered fill material. Gravel is not considered pervious material.
But we're not at that stage. yet.
Right,
No.
and
Let's-
the wall might not
let's-
be
let's don't
approved
get too
either.
far off here.
Yeah, the wall and the floodplain might not be approved either, Kevin. So it's something we'll talk about as they move closer. But I think the important thing is for Mr. Coffey's timeline and for yours, that the report move forward and that any plans to redevelop be considered after the decision on demolition is made. So we're not necessarily spinning wheels unnecessarily.
Okay. Anything else? Kevin, you got anything else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, right now, the way that's configured, you know, it's less than 1,000 square feet of coverage. So it's well below the 50% of the main house coverage.
I had one more thing. What is the size of this outbuilding, the one that you're asking to demolish?
It is,
The existing outbuilding or the,
Mhm.
okay.
I think the number was 360 square feet.
That's what you had mentioned earlier, Kevin.
Yeah.
360.
And the proposed is 977, so it would be in the same footprint, but about 3 times.
365.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else? Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready for the next. Discussion of new construction accessory at 316 Bridge Street. Eric Smith, applicant.
I am like Kevin, don't have a lot of experience here.
Well, it's nice to see you, Eric.
Yeah.
Well, you are welcome to go ahead. If you push this button, the green light comes on, then
Okay.
the microphone
That's
will be on.
good.
What, you just wanted to give me an you want me to give you an overview?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, Susan Comer has asked, us to look into building an accessory dwelling structure on the back of her property. And then I guess we've got the plans. Do you wanna know what square footage is? or
Yes,
something? Is that right
square
off the top?
footages, heights,
Yeah.
distance from the house, whatever you can share with us.
The very, let's see, what is it, heights right there. We've got, the existing house is, just about 22 feet tall, and the proposed structure is, almost 18 feet. So we're right at 4 feet below the, existing house, maximum height. Let's see. Distance back, I don't have that exact measurement on there, but it's in the range of.
Can you turn the mic on, hit that button? There you go.
Am I on?
You're on.
Sorry about that. I guess it was already on, sir. It's approximately, it's somewhere in the range of 30 feet, behind the existing, deck of the home. So 30 to 40 feet, right in that measurement. She has asked for it to be tucked over to the north side of the property. And then on the, I think it's the second to last page there, we've got kind of some street views of, what it would look like from the street. There's some trees on the right-hand side of the property, kind of in that bottom view
Okay.
right there. So it's pretty much most of the structure will be blocked from the road, with the trees there on the property, so.
Okay. Amanda, do you have anything?
Thank you, Eric. I just wanted to share that the property is, I've got some street views here. So this is the circa 1940 clipped gable bungalow that everyone very much is familiar with. It's very unique and it's very quintessential of that street. The existing outbuilding there, you can't really see from this angle, so I provided a photograph. It appears to be an original frame construction contributing outbuilding, and I believe it is not proposed in the same area as the new accessory dwelling, but I did want to note that that is there, and per the zoning ordinance, the accessory structure that is proposed could be built that met all the requirements of the Historic Zoning Commission, of course, and it's less than 50% of the footprint of the house, and this structure is less than 200 square feet, which it certainly appears to be from viewing it. So the expectation, Mr. Smith, would be that this building that you see on the screen would be preserved and maintained in its current location.
Yeah, that building isn't there right now.
Well, that's unfortunate because this photograph was taken very recently, so.
Okay, I would have to talk to her about that. It is not on the property.
Okay, well, thank you for letting us know. We'll certainly look into that.
Okay.
Okay, so it would have been required to stay. I will follow up on that. So moving on to the next portion, you can see how deep the property is. So the proposed accessory dwelling would be at the rear here. I'm trying to get back to the plan sets. Here's the front elevation as proposed. Per design guidelines, the accessory structure should be designed so that the upper level measures no more than 60% of the lower level. So that is something that we would need to have confirmed. I believe this does have an attic, though. There is not an upper level proposed on this building, correct?
Yeah, there's no upper level on the building.
Okay.
Just-
And then per the zoning ordinance, I mentioned the 50%, which this certainly appears to be. One note that the new design guidelines mentions for accessory structures is that one should only consider adding porches to accessory structures or balconies to them if they're placed out of the public view shed and subordinate in footprint, size, mass, and scale to the main form of accessory structures, as porches were not common to historic accessory structures. And so it would be my recommendation that if the fence and the trees are the only thing mitigating from street view, that the porch be relocated to the face the interior of the backyard and not be facing the street, as it may be perceived to be a second house behind the house. Accessory structures historically did not feature porches of this type, so it would further differentiate the use and subordination of the structure to the principal it serves. Thank you.
What's the square footage of the house and what's the square footage of this structure?
I wasn't ready for that one. I believe the house is around 3,000 square foot. I don't know that for sure, but this structure is 812 square feet.
Okay.
Does that include the porch?
Let's see. It's 28, so it's 20, let's see, 28 by 30 is the, minus a little bit, so we're, I don't believe that that's including the porch. Would, should I just get rid of the porch if she does not want the porch on the side of the building? Would that be recommended?
So, Mr. Smith, the City of Franklin calculates anything under roof as part of the square footage. So in this case, the porch square footage would be considered when considering the size of the building in relation to the principal structure. So that's part of the reason that was asked by the DRC members.
So it's 840 without the porch, right? 28 by 30?
812. They've got a little section that's like a, if you
Okay.
square it
All
up,
right.
you get 840.
Okay.
And then the porch is about 168 square feet.
Yeah.
So I have a,
So, okay,
Oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
where, are we still on the square footage? Go ahead.
No, so 812 plus the 150 is 962, so you're under the 50% from that standpoint. assuming it's 3,000 square feet.
I can look on the property assessor really quickly and get an estimate of this, of the footprint of the building.
It's 2553.
Oh, you already looked? Thank you. So it is less.
Okay, so you're still okay from that standpoint. And the lot size is,
I have not looked into that. I wanted to talk about the porch before we got into that point. Mr. Smith, the Historic District Design Guidelines recommend that the lot coverage not exceed 35%. So that would count your principal structure, this structure, and any other outbuilding if it were there. So what we would do is take the footprint, including porches of each of those, and add those together and see how it relates to the overall property size. And I don't know, Tyler, if you still have that pulled up, but if you do, then we could see what that property size is.
It crashed.
Okay, I can pull it up. Give me just a moment.
Go.
So while you do that, there was one exhibit where you were showing how the tree would hide whatever the accessory building. As a commission, we're not supposed to take landscaping as part of the thing that hides anything from the street view. So is there a reason that the accessory building has to be in that particular location?
Yeah, that's just where she desired for it to be. We can talk to her about adjusting it so it's directly behind the property, or
Yeah.
directly behind the house too.
So the size of the property is approximately 19,600 square feet.
what is that? I didn't hear you.
19,602 square feet per the property assessor.
0.45 acres.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, is it part of the guidelines that the accessory has to be behind the house?
It's
Or,
not.
I mean, behind, but not
Yes,
directly
it's not
behind.
directly behind the guidelines, so I'd recommend typical locations such as it need to be behind the plane ideally, but it could be directly behind or to the side. The location is not problematic from a guideline standpoint. It's more about the location of the porch. If the porch is supported by the commission, that is certainly the commission's prerogative, but it would be recommended by staff per guidelines that the porch be removed or be relocated so it faces inward, so you don't experience that from the street view.
And I would agree with that because the porch visually just looks so long compared to the porch on the house. And I would also recommend not having the clipped roof line to mimic the house, because I feel like the house is just got its own special architectural features, and making it comply with the house, to me, kind of minimizes the importance of the architecture of the house. Rather see it more simple.
Is this a commercial building?
It
The
is,
house?
it's a home, luckily.
It's got, just curious, on the Google map,
It's zoned to office residential, so it could be used
It could.
either way.
there's a sidewalk from one neighbor to the other neighbor's parking lot. So I just thought it was, Peculiar.
She owns both those houses.
Yeah.
She owns that one and the one to the north side.
I guess the only thing also kind of odd to me is these back doors. I don't know how neighbors feel about that, but typically it's not something we normally see. I don't know if there's a rule against it. I'm just bringing it up because it's peculiar to have doors out the back.
Yeah, the property backs up to a parking lot right now. There's a fence across the back of the property, and there's a parking lot across
Right.
there. I don't know what the I don't know what the commercial building is that it services, but it is a parking lot for commercial use.
Anything else? Tyler, you still studying?
Good.
Susan?
I personally don't have a problem with the clipped roof. I think that, it's not really a very complex facade that you've, developed here. And so I think that it's actually giving a nod to the house, so I'm not having a problem with the clipped, the jerkin head, details.
Yeah, I believe that she didn't really have a suggestion either way on what she wanted. I had drawn it without the clipped, and then I told her maybe we'd try that and see what your guys' opinion was on that. So I think she'd be open to whatever your guys' guidelines or desires were on that, and would be fine.
I think if it is clipped, it also reduces somewhat of the appearance of the mass of the building. But I think you need to develop it more for us to take a look at that and the relationship between the two.
That's an excellent observation. I think that the thing that we'd like to note, and I keep missing the pages here, is that the overall ridge of the proposed structure is roughly in line with the, it looks like it might be roughly in line or a little bit different than the secondary on the principal. So it is not that much smaller, but I do think that clipped or not, relocating the porch is going to help. Maybe keeping clipped with the porch relocated or removed is the compromise that will help it feel more subordinate to the principal structure.
I might feel different when it was drawn. I'm just not a fan of it looking like main house, baby house,
And a mailbox.
baby relative house.
I certainly agree that hipped in general is the way to go, and not doing a front-facing gable on this form, because I do think that would be consequential to the perceived height.
Anything else? Okay. Eric, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, we're ready for the next item, discussion of new construction accessory at 418 Lewisburg Avenue, Collins Farm. City of Franklin applicant.
So I just wanted to go ahead and note that the rest of the agenda is composed of city projects. We do have a number of city staff members here today, and we do have some guests joining us. We have Brian Walker here from the Parks Department, and then we have with him Miss Sarah Hill from the Daughters of the American Revolution, and the architect for the daughters. So I'll let them all introduce themselves and go ahead and cue everything up.
Okay, thanks. Brian, you going first?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Brian Walker with the Parks Department. What I'll do is just briefly introduce Ms. Ford and Patrick Reyna. Ms. Ford, she'll kind of briefly describe what their purpose is here with the DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution.
Hi, we are the second oldest continuous organization here in Franklin, second to the Masonic Lodge Temple. We've been here for 125 years. We're not going anyplace. And the mission of DAR is first and foremost historic preservation. So we're all like-minded with you guys. Patriotism and education. And so we do various things around the city, have done things since we started in 1897. And one of the projects that we looked into, we had gone to talk to the Parks Department several years ago. This has been a 3-year process about doing something for the city. We do things for the cemetery. We do historic preservation. We participate in veterans activities, parades, and honoring people. So anyway, when we went to talk to the Parks Department, they presented us and talked with us, and Amanda Hall was there, and we started talking about the Collins Farm because it was a piece of property that the city has and is kind of in disrepair. And as we began to look into our history and start to look into it, it was an American land grant, American Revolution land grants. We thought this is a great opportunity for us to give something to the city, do something. And so over the last few years, we've discussed and talked, and we have put in a garden. We've donated a garden to the city, and there's 8 beds in that. You can go over and see it now. There's a flagpole with a nice solar light, so we can leave a flag up at night. And in the beds, that's going to give us an opportunity to educate people on things that were on the property in the area at the time. And then we will hopefully be able to use the park with everybody else. It's still city-owned in the public park, and we can have some veteran meetings there, and we can have some, again, educational, patriotic, and then, again, historic preservation. And so now, the second phase, that was the first phase, was putting in the garden. Second phase was to add a pavilion on site, and there was in the conservation papers that go with that paper. There is mention of a pavilion. So we went, great. We'd love to donate a pavilion. So again, there's a covered structure, a very basic 4-post and a roof structure, so that people can go and sit and enjoy and be up there and work on the garden. The public can come and have lunch and enjoy the park. And then Patrick Reyna is one of our husbands of DAR, and he is a former retired U.S. Navy officer, and he is an engineer, and so we quickly grabbed a hold of him, and he's really the one that is doing all the heavy work with Brian and with the city to talk about this structure that we're going to talk about today. And Mr. Reyna is a engineer, civil engineer, mechanical, and has structural, has done bases and installations all over the world, big stuff. So he's agreed to help us and volunteered his time and efforts to be our structural engineer on this project.
So that brings us to the pavilion. The pavilion that we are proposing would be located near the garden area, and it would be between the house and the drive that's to the if you're standing on Lewisburg Pike, it would be to the left of the property. The dimensions, or the pavilion itself would be built from a kit. It wouldn't be custom construction, but from a kit from a supplier that creates these on a national level. The sizes of the pavilion would be 16 by 16 and 12 feet at the highest point. It would sit on a concrete pad that would be of similar dimensions. The lumber that would be used would be Douglas fir, rough sawn lumber, and any of the fasteners and material that's used to hold the pavilion together would be metal, and the idea would be painted flat black. So I open up to any questions at this time.
Questions?
I'll just note what the guidelines say, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, this is a city project, as is the remainder of the agenda. Staff will not be providing a formal recommendation to the commission if the items were to move forward to the COA application stage. But staff will provide what the guidelines say in relation to the project. So in this case, the guidelines state that one should use materials and exterior finishes typically used of historic equivalents, to avoid strictly modern siding materials like vinyl and pressed wood. And if new accessory structures lack historically appropriate detailing, such as on prefabricated sheds, that they are located so they're not visible from the front facade or street. As far as the zoning ordinance, this is again located in the floodplain, so it must consist of floodproof materials that may cause some necessary changes to the materials, like the framing. Wood would be appropriate so long as it's the correct species, like cedar, cypress, redwood, etc. Planning staff, again, will not be providing a formal recommendation. Thanks.
Okay.
Could we-
Comments?
Could we see the aerial view again, please? Or the, yeah. So, can you indicate what the green represents?
The green area represents the approximate location of the garden, and then the orange square would be the approximate location of the shed
Okay.
or pavilion.
And following up to that, so the Collins house is what we see behind the trees, or kind of halfway into the trees?
Correct, that's correct.
So we see that that gable structure, as I remember, it kind of runs perpendicular to the road. So you can see the gable would be at the road and then run back. So with the pavilion, would it run perpendicular, like it's running, the gable running into the side of the house, or would it be parallel with it?
We can turn that either direction. It being a square about 16 by 16, we can turn it any direction that is preferred or recommended.
I was thinking as I was drawing it up, that it made more sense for the gable to be facing the garden, and that would make the gable, the ridge of the gable parallel to the house.
So it'd be turned differently than what we're shown on this map?
Well, it's square.
Oh, is it square?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's square, so.
Looks rectangular to me, but.
And the idea there is that the gable, which is open, and when I first heard about the project, that it would be used to give some seminars, not only about the American Revolution, but historical things that the DAR is involved with. And that facing the garden would make a lot of sense, but it being square, it doesn't make any difference. It can go.
It's a metal roof?
I'm sorry?
A metal roof?
Yes, it is. And I was asked if there was a color, and we chose not to have any color because the corn crib around the corner is a metal roof without color, and historically, they wouldn't have put ceramic coatings on the metal roofs with color, so it's galvanized.
I would just say something as a side note, since this is a kit, that it be a US-made kit.
What? Oh, the kit? Oh, yeah, it's all 100% of the materials are US, as a matter of fact, yeah.
So
We originally were going to stick build it ourselves. I was originally asked to draw a design from a structural standpoint. It's extremely difficult to find sawed wood. Almost everywhere, the wood is sawed and then planed, okay? And they wouldn't have done that 100, 150 years ago. It would have been sawed. And one of the first things that caught our attention is the people who build this kit do it in rough cut timber. And then a second benefit there is the hardware that they've designed with it is all black metal hardware, which was also what would be the way it would have been built 100 years ago. So it enhanced the project.
what is the age of the Collins farm? What the age do you think is on the cabin? Or the corn crib, I should say, the log structure?
Oh, I believe I don't know the exact age of the farm crib. If I do believe it was brought to the property, I don't think it was original, but I don't recall the exact age.
And the Collins farm?
So again, the Collins Farm was all an American Revolutionary land grant. That was part of the McGavick property, and Amanda, jump in here if I'm wrong, anybody jump in here. And then in our research, there's two structures on there, and we had people from the Tennessee State Historic Commission come and look at one of them. One of them is turn of the century, again, and Amanda gave us a good phrase of it's old, it's not historic on one of those structures. One structure is historic, and again, our hope is that part of the purpose in getting the garden on here and then getting the pavilion, it will again begin to draw attention to the need that those two structures need to be saved before because they're falling in now. And that's kind of our thought, again, is to bring awareness to that and maybe help save those buildings as well.
And I'm all for that. I think that we're talking about a very significant property that the city has as part of our park system. And that's why I was asking, do you like the actual structure of the house? You know, do you have any kind of date on that house?
The people from again, the one structure is probably early 1900s. The one that we're really interested in is possibly 1800s. So again, until we could really start looking at that or working on that or helping, other people would have to, but there were signs in there when we went through the building with people from the state of Tennessee that they said there were the square pegs and the wood and things like that. There were some significant things that dated that pre-Civil War. So everybody wants to talk about that being a Civil War.
I can jump in, and I know Ms. Clayton here with the Parks Department might be able to help as well. What Sarah Ford is referring to is the staff of the Tennessee Historical Commission, specifically Patrick McIntyre and Dan Brown. Yes. Dan Brown is an absolute expert at dating buildings, in my opinion, and he was able to look at some of the methods of construction. There is one building that is certainly contemporary to the war era, and I believe what Ms. Ford was referring to, my statements, and I can't remember exactly what I said and to what reference, but there is a building that's not contemporary to the reason that the property has been designated on the National Register. But as I've noted, as buildings and sites change over time, some of those buildings can gain significance in their own right. I am going to pull up some of the information to help answer some of the questions that you have asked, and I know that
The one date that was shown was 1867.
Yes.
And I asked that question to make just one opinion, and that is, this is not Pinkerton Park. I know we've got pavilions, and I love the pavilions in Pinkerton Park and the other parks in the park system. But you're talking about a significant historical site, and I think that we should give great consideration to a stick-built building that would complement the structures that are currently there, rather than being a kit. And I know that there are cedar sawmills within an hour's drive of here that actually do rough sawn cedar, and we even have a sawmill locally, Fox Brothers Sawmill. So I mean, those things can be sourced, and for the floodplain, you'd have to either have cedar or cypress or something like that. So that's available. So that's my main comment on what we put in that spot that is near a historic structure should complement it.
And I want to reiterate what Mr. Laster stated. I take all the design review committee applications and I share them with my colleagues in building and neighborhood services and other departments as needed on a case-by-case basis. In this case, it was brought to my attention that because it is in the floodplain, it would have to be flood-proof materials. So as I stated earlier, Mr. Laster reinforced this would need to be a wood that can be rot resistant. So if the kit does have that, that would be something that I'm sure that we can conceivably look at, but Historic Zoning Commission would not be able to accept anything that wouldn't meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance in this respect. So the wood wouldn't have to be a flood-proof, water-resistant material.
Would or would not?
It would have to.
Okay.
No pun intended. So I don't know what the kit anticipates. What type of wood does the kit show?
I thought he said Douglas fir.
It says Douglas fir.
Douglas fir, yeah.
Okay, so that, it would either need to be a kit that's modified to have the correct wood species, or it would need to be built differently.
Mr. Chair, I have just a comment. I'm very familiar with this site. I live on Lewisburg Pike, so I drove by it to get here. And I love the concept of doing something, especially since you've tied it to a pavilion. And I'm not opposed to a kit because it's a kit. But to Mr. Laster's point, I think the comment I would have is it's going to be pretty darn visible given the proposed location from the road. And I just think we need to be sensitive to it, not to that point, not looking like a pavilion that is at some place like Pinkerton Park. And I don't think what you're showing is exactly that at all. But it'd be helpful for me to see, in connection with what's being proposed at the meeting, some examples of other kind of historically appropriate pavilions. And there may not be many, but obviously the research shows there was one here consistent with that.
So, Mr. Denton, your question is or your focus is on the design appropriateness.
Yeah, for this type of I mean, it's a little interesting because it's this farm setting, and I can't imagine it's very common to have pavilions like that on it. Maybe it is, and I'm just not appreciating it. I mean, the records clearly showed it did, so.
Well, sorry, may not have been clear. It says that it will allow for a pavilion to
see.
be built.
Okay.
And it talks about when this was the conservation easement.
I see.
thing.
Okay,
So
sorry.
that's where we went, great, a pavilion. This gives some cover to people to
Sure.
sit, because it's hot out there. And then we did look at the corn crib, and we went,
Yeah.
we want to match the corn crib. So, and we discussed this with everybody, with Amanda and Lisa and Brian. We've all been out there many, many times, so.
Right.
And then on the kit, I'm gonna let you say.
Yeah, I don't have an
Well-
objection to a kit as long as it meets personally, I don't, as long as it meets the requirements from the floodplain standpoint, which is a city
Okay.
issue.
Well,
So I was trying to get some guidance from you, Mr. Denton.
Yes, sir.
From a design standpoint. And as I understand, the question is, can we find something similar in other historic places with a similar design? And Mr. Lassiter, if I understand your point, is that if we can source the lumber locally, and I'm totally capable of stick building it, that was your focus. So those are kind of homeworks for us, as I understand it, then, to not verify, but demonstrate that this has an appropriate design for the location, and it would be nice to have local lumber.
I think I can bridge those two comments together, and you all fill in if I'm not hearing it, but because the guidelines recommend that prefabricated materials be located so they're not visible from the street unless they're designed like historic equivalents, you're hearing that a kit may be okay, in Mr. Dent's opinion, if it was designed to be typical of historic equivalents. And Brian is giving suggestion as to how it could be typical of historic equivalents. And my comment would be that because the kit, as I understand it, isn't of the materials that would meet the requirements of the floodplain construction standards in the zoning ordinance, that I can work with you and Mr. Walker and the Parks Department directly, and just start looking at different options that might make sure that meets, run that through my colleagues in BNS to make sure it does, and then we can come back to the commission and run through a couple of options. Am I
Well-
hearing that correctly?
Well,
I need to clarify.
Okay.
So you had used initially the word stick-built, and so I said stick-built. Well, if it was stick-built or timber frame, I mean, it'd be fine. I mean, I'm just saying it needs to look like it's something that belongs with the house, rather than something that, a kit from the 21st century.
and Mr. Chair, I guess what I would say, I'm not against the pavilion at all, and bless you all for causing there to be focus to this,
Yes,
because
thank you.
this is a demolition by neglect situation for what I think is a treasure. But I believe that this house needs something that is designed and built on site, in my mind, rather than a kit. It's a one-of-a-kind treasure, and I don't think we want to do, I don't think this would do great harm, but I feel like with the Daughters of the American Revolution and what you all have done, that has been, hands touching historic properties, I would want to see it built, and I think there's a number of, you've got one person capable, and there's many others in town that would be happy to share thoughts. So that's how I would see it.
I think it's an opportunity that should be
I do
grabbed.
too.
It tells the story.
And
It's
that's-
just
and that's
another
what-
story.
That's what we're trying to do, and I get it, I appreciate you want it to look historic. It's 4 posts and a metal roof. It's 4 posts and a metal roof.
And you've
It's
got a
4
garden
posts
that's
and a
already,
metal
you've got a
roof.
garden that's already there that's
The garden's already
highly visible
there.
from the street. This does not
Right,
represent
and
the situation now.
so the wood, where the historic part for it to tie in, again, we were looking toward that corn crib, which has been there, which was put on site, it wasn't there, and we wanted to match, and we went, well, the metal roof will patina, will rust, will do whatever. The wood, the 4 wood posts will also gray. We left if you go over to the garden now, the garden is cedar plank around the cedar. We're going to let that gray so that it matches the corn crib. You can't really, again, you've got 2 different buildings. You've got a 1920s, 1900s building that some of you guys may have known the last people that lived there. And then you have a historically significant building that really needs attention, and it's caving in, and nobody's there. So again, what we're doing is we've donated the garden. We're donating just some cover, again, to get people there and aware. Then we can, I'd rather not talk about the house because we can't commit to that.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about the house.
Right, we just we want to get people on the property and a presence, and
You've
and
done a,
be
you've done a
there,
great job with
so-
the garden. We had a site visit before you had the garden in there, so we've walked the site, and we saw that, and we approved all of that, and it looks great. It will weather, all that cedar will weather. I don't have a problem with the kit. I think if you can find something locally sourced with the lumber, great. But I think with a 16 by 16 pavilion that you're talking about, it'll be fine. So,
I think that the changes that would be required for the
For the floodproof, yeah, I
will
understand.
address the concerns of
Yeah,
the
but-
commission for the most part, because it will change the wood to a cedar, a redwood, cypress.
and that's fine. I understand that.
Yeah, and I think that'll get at some of the concerns that I've heard.
So, Anything else?
I was gonna comment just a little bit on the 4 posts and a roof thing. It's more than that, because I see a timber truss, which has some members that we wouldn't see on something that went with this house. And it has little OG curves, which is a Tuscan detail at the bottom of the eaves, the rafter tails. Wouldn't have seen that in 1866 on not an Italianate house. So there's little details on this kit that I think that's what we're getting at. It maybe doesn't fit the house and property, and if you get to stick build it, you can control those elements a little more. So, yeah, that's what I'm worried about. It's like,
We're a charity
yeah.
organization. We're doing all we can to come up with the money to.
Absolutely.
To give this to the city, so, again,
I hear you.
it, and
I understand.
that's what we've got Pat to make adjustments for any of those with the truss, or if it needs to be different, but when you start talking about panking
Don't do that.
posts or, you know,
It'd be
those
really
things,
expensive. Yeah, and there's,
we're limited with
Yeah.
our funds.
and that may be something worth, you know, if you decide the kit's the best option for you all, come back and tell us why. And if you've gone and talked to Fox Hardwoods, if you went and talked to them and found out what lumber would cost and it's twice as much.
We've
Yeah.
certainly, we're not showing up. We've been talking about this for 3.5 years. And then Pat's been looking, he's done all the research on the wood, and he builds in that area, so he
Yeah.
knows. So we have done our homework on it, but maybe we're just not presenting it easy enough for, because again, the garden's already there.
Sure. Well, like I said, I'm not sure the stylistic details from the kit are not appropriate in my mind
Okay.
yet.
All right, and that's where I'm trying to refine, I don't want to use the word criticism, but in a positive way, the recommendations, because I can build anything and have.
Yeah.
So whether those support structures are curved or straight, piece of cake. The lintels, I think they are appropriate. You want it structurally strong, especially if you're spanning 16 feet. The hardware, was there a comment on the hardware, on the supports?
You wouldn't have
And
seen.
again, I'm
you would
looking
not
for
have
guidance.
Seen 'em.
You would not have seen that hardware.
Would have been mortise and tenon back then.
And so I would encourage you to go to the national park system and look at places like Appomattox Courthouse.
Oh,
Look at.
I've been there.
The fort at Fort Smith, Arkansas, and see in the National Park Service what kind of pavilions they have put up that are historically sensitive to their buildings, and that may give you some ideas. And another consideration that I think is very important, at least for me as a board member, is that our #1 tourist attraction in our county is Carnton. And it's adjacent to this property, almost, just right around the corner. And when tourists come to our city and they say, well, this is what Franklin, puts up next to historic structures, you want people to say, when they go by, say, wow, Franklin really puts a lot of thought into what they do next to their historic structures.
Well, I want to end by saying I really appreciate what the Daughters of the American Revolution are doing. They're bringing a lot of positive attention to this site, and really having someone on the site is the best thing that we could do for those buildings right now. I understand from the comments we received that perhaps simpler is better. So, drive them to do something just as simple as possible. And I know that the material may have to change in order to accommodate the standards that are not in your control, but are required just to maintain safety for everyone involved. So we will get back to the drawing board and we'll come back. But we appreciate your comments and thank you very, very, very much.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for the next item, discussion of alterations, main barn, drive aisle at 239 Franklin Road. Harlinsdale. Amanda.
Thank you all. I am going to pull up some items. I can't pull everything up before the meeting because it times out, but while I'm doing that, I wanted to share a couple of things. So the City of Franklin is working with the Friends of Franklin Parks in order to bring forward a proposal that would involve the main barn at Harlinsdale. Some of you may recall that the city's consultant, 906 Studio Architects, has spoken with the DRC before, I think it was sometime last year, about some proposed alterations to the exterior. And the city team, which is inclusive of a number of folks, but namely Planning Department, Parks Department, and Engineering Department, have worked in tandem to address not only the DRC comments, but also comments from the Tennessee Historical Commission staff. The Tennessee Historical Commission has a preservation covenant on this building on the property, which means that it will be reviewing both interior and exterior alterations proposed. Now, the Historic Zoning Commission is also charged with reviewing exterior alterations. So it is a little bit of a process, and we don't want to get too far ahead with one group or the other. But what we have before you today are revisions to the previous proposal that you saw last year to address, again, comments from both committees, yourself and the state. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, and I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Pretty and Shahad Abdul-Rahman, who is from our engineering team. Thank you.
Hello.
Sorry. Thank you. Hello. So again, to Amanda's point, this is similar to what we had discussed.
Brandon, have you got that mic on?
Yes, sir. Is that better?
That's better. Yeah,
I just
thanks.
gotta-
Just
I
a
just
little
got to talk
closer.
into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very similar to what we had proposed and discussed last year. After some discussion with the state, we have actually reduced the scope of some of the work. I'll point out the second, we'll go real quick to the second page is a site plan. And it shows the areas in red are areas that we had previously proposed paving. That's gone away. So all we'll have is the ring road, and that's primarily a life safety to allow fire truck to get around the site, and then the approach. Then the
And
next.
I want to make sure they're all seeing this. So what Brandon's saying is everything in red has been pulled from the plan. And the ring road that you see here is proposed to be West Tennessee mix,
That's right.
which is in keeping with what you see out at Eastern Flank Battlefield Park and with the main drive at Harlinsdale.
Yes, correct, thank you. And then the next page in the floor plan, we had previously been proposing doors into the horse stall areas, which is the upper left-hand corner of that. Those have gone away. We had also previously, probably the piece we talked the most about, we had some large glass egress doors on the left and right, plan left, plan right end of the space. Those, that was something the state was not very excited about. Now, we still need to meet egressing for the space. It's proposed to be an assembly space, so you're talking about bringing, several hundred people into a space. We've spoken with Fire Marshal at length about this. Life safety is always going to be our primary concern, is the guy that's got to stamp it. But what we landed on is, instead of interrupting those two primary ends, we will keep the sliding doors as is, but then we're proposing cutting egress doors into the ends. But as you can see in the next slide, or the next sheet, I've got, we're proposing those to be kind of concealed, hidden. We would cut them around the siding. You wouldn't have trim pieces. You wouldn't have any of that. We would conceal them visually as much as possible. And there's on the side, we've got some images that show concealed hinges. We would have just the minimal hardware necessary to allow for those to operate. Again, trying to make the least visual impact we can while still providing for life safety, because at the end of the day, for this to function as a space, as an event space, we've just got to have a way to safely get people out. Fire Marshal, as we've discussed several times, the sliding doors are not adequate to that, because if those are closed, egress doors need to be able to pop out, crash out, and those just aren't able to do that. So those are the, I guess, if you're talking about changes from what we had discussed last time we were here, that's really the biggest shift in direction. So I guess I'll just ask for comment, questions, anything I can help with to eliminate that.
Brandon, do you mind commenting on whether or not the existing window would be maintained, or would that have to be removed to accommodate the door?
It'll need to be removed. Now, what we put back, we'll work that window into the design. So again, wanting to make it appear as much as what it is now as we can. But I don't know that we can, in fact, I believe, are those glass or those plexiglass? There's plexi. So we wouldn't be able to use that material in the door itself. I think we'd be able to work some glass into that to, again, maintain the current appearance to the greatest extent possible. I think even more so than what we had originally proposed, when once those doors were open, you had a large, nice looking, but still a new large glass door that was going to, change the appearance of what was there.
So the intent, and I'm really doing this more to make sure that we're getting everything out of you guys and that you understand the intent. The intent is to do something that has hidden fasteners so that you wouldn't necessarily know that the facade on the left side and the right side is viewed from the street has been altered to add these doors, and that they would not be operable from the outside, but they'd be operable from the inside should egress be required in the case of an emergency.
That's correct. The one small caveat I'd say to that is we will need we'll need one operable piece because the fire marshal wants to be able to use those to get in if they need to. But again, that's a pretty simple handle with a latch on it. No trim, no alternate coloring. I mean, my intent is if I'm standing 50 feet away from this thing, I wouldn't. If I've done my job right, you don't notice that those are even there. We're maintain the coursing of the siding, keep all that so it's as seamless as possible and doesn't interrupt or change what's there currently.
Amanda, could you pull up the floor plan that shows the location of those
Sure.
And
egress
Mr.
doors?
Chair, it looks like there's 2 windows on either side in the building, and on the drawing, 1. And I don't think you're changing it.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Am I
we'll address,
looking at something wrong?
we'll address each.
Okay.
We'll start with Kathy. So Kathy, this is the right facade, and this is where you see that location. So this is the main sliding door, and this is here. You're also seeing a door here that's proposed for a warming kitchen. So that's recessed pretty far back from that facade on the, more toward the back side. And then you're also seeing one proposed to the right of the sliding door that is on the left facade as viewed from the street. Now to go back to this page, this is the front facade, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so this facade is, no
That
wait,
that
this
was
is
a
not the
picture-
front facade, this is,
No, I think the other one's the picture of the rear. The next one, the one next to it.
okay, I
I
want to make
was
sure,
looking
because
at the drawing.
Or
No, go down to the other drawing
this is the front.
at the bottom.
Below the
Yes.
photo,
Yeah.
below the photograph.
And this is the left. So there's not a photograph of the left here.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Yeah,
I
that's
got
where
to your
I'm
point.
confused.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure we have that for you when we submit it.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I had a question about the doors as shown. The ones that are in the sidebar where they're opening in, do the doors actually open both ways, or because of those concealed hinges, you can only push them in, like if you were on
Well,
the outside?
as egress doors, they'll need to open out.
So these, will they, with the hidden hinge, will they do that?
Will they? Well, I think with
Like if
the
you look at,
concealed,
if you look at the illustration or the photograph of the door being opened, like
Yeah.
that's proposed, it's opening where the wood planks are
Yeah,
going in.
yeah.
So will it be able to go either way?
no, it'll only open out, and that'll probably be, and I was looking for an image, because I noticed that when I was finding it. The hinge will be as concealed as I can make it to open out. So I guess it may look, and I'm, if there's a way we can offset or detail that even with a piece overlapping, we'll do that. We kind of haven't gone through and detailed those
Yeah.
completely yet. Obviously wanted to.
I think it'd be helpful for me to see that door, not so much open, but how it's gonna look when it's closed with the hinge that you're
Yeah.
gonna use, because I think that,
I think you'll end up with, you'll probably have a 3/4 inch gap because, physically for that door to open out, there's
Right,
going to have
you
to be
gotta-
some sort of a gap there.
yeah.
We'll obviously minimize that as much as we can.
That was kind of my reaction when I looked at that
Yeah.
image. If we were pushing the doors in, I think you'd get a much closer seal.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out how that would work going out, I couldn't, I'm no engineer, but I couldn't
Yeah,
figure out how that would look exactly the same.
Yeah. You will have a little reveal around the perimeter of that. That's correct. Or at least around the sides.
So
What
how-
changes are you making to the big doors on the north, south, east, and west ends of the building?
I'm not making any change. That front entry door, we're not touching at all.
All right,
All
so
of them
how do you get,
operate on.
why are they not being used for egress?
Because, so to completely answer your first question, though, we are proposing the rear door, the rear overhead door, which is not original to the building. We're proposing coming back and creating an egress door there. So the reason, to answer your second question, because of the occupant load, we're required to have 3 points of egress. So that's why we didn't want to touch the front historic door. I'm smart enough to know I'm not even going to ask to touch that, ever. But rear door, just logically, you've got to have one at the rear, and then to avoid dead-end corridor limits, you've got to have them at those two ends. So we've got the 3 egress
Okay, but
points.
here,
So Jim, I think I know what you're asking. So
Yeah.
you cannot use the sliding doors as egress doors.
why?
Because
I
an
will leave
egress
that.
door needs, and if those are closed and a bunch of people are trying to get out at once, they're not going to be able to get out. I guess eventually they'd bust, but you can't do that. By code, an egress door, you've got to have crash bars. It's got to open out. It can only be so wide. It can only be so big because it can't be so big. A person, a small, weak person can't push it and get out in case of an emergency.
There's a weight limit.
Yes.
Okay.
Like if you go to Walmart and they have those things,
Yeah.
if you hit those hard enough in a
That's right.
fire, they break open.
Correct.
Right.
These are old, they're not breaking open.
So
It's
my,
just a different thing.
yeah,
So-
I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I want to make sure everyone understands. So, and that's a great question, Jim, because that would
Well, I
be
just
the
see,
logical
I see
thing,
four
right?
I see four big doors, and you're just saying because of the size and the weight,
I can't use any
they're
of those.
not
to
egress.
Correct, because two of them are sliding and 2 of them are overhead doors.
Okay.
None of those meet the requirements for egress doors.
Okay.
But to get to
Sorry,
your
I'm
other
too
question, and to answer the exterior doors, as Brandon noted, the front door, the front main facade door staying in place. Talk about the sides and the rear, please, for the big doors.
The sliding doors?
Mhm.
So what the only, I don't even hesitate to call it an alteration. So we're gonna pull those down, fix them, rehang them. We also wanna, we'll put some things around the perimeter to seal the holes because we don't want animals, things like that being able to come in because, this will be a finished space that's gonna be used. But again, you won't see that. That's not gonna change the appearance of the doors. In addition to that, the sliding doors will remain as is. I mean, they slide now, they'll slide then. We're not proposing any sort of a change to those
Okay.
doors. And we're not proposing, or on the rear door, the current overhead door, we're gonna build a new egress door that will look, with the grid, the trim, it'll look as close as I can get it, if not exactly to how it looks now.
Okay, so you got 300 or 400 people in there, and you're trying to get out. Are those 2 egress doors sufficient?
The
Three
three
egress
egre-
doors.
yes.
So they're sufficient to clear
Yes.
that building?
Yes.
So the third door is the rear door. The rear door of the barn, which you can see on this photograph here, was replaced 20-something years ago. It's not original to the barn.
All right.
And what is proposed to be done is that there is a way that a pedestrian door is installed inside of that
Okay.
that you wouldn't see, so that,
The second page has a drawing on there that
yes.
it'll show, bottom left-hand corner. So I've outlined in red the areas of the door, and then as you can see, we've got side lights, patterns,
Okay.
again, mimicking what's there as close as we possibly can.
So the intent is to reuse the existing rear door, even though it's not historic, because it has an appropriate appearance, and alter it so that it could have doors that will meet those crash requirements. And again, it's on the rear, so you don't see that so much from the facade, the main view shed of the barn, I should say. And then it's also not altering a historic element of the building.
So will that, the top elevation on that sheet, will you have to limit the travel of the slider so it doesn't cover your egress door?
No, I think we've got those set.
I mean, I can see the track is
Yeah.
almost to the
They don't
middle
slide all
between
the
the
way to
two
end of
doors.
The track, they'll stop short of it.
Okay.
Or
I didn't-
they will, in the final configuration, they will have to stop short of it,
Yeah.
because obviously they can't block the door.
Right.
Although, well, yeah.
Yeah.
You can make the case that if they're open, you don't need the egress doors.
And those tracks
So
will be
really it's-
automated, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And one
They
thing
will
we plan to ask the state is if they are automated, would that make a difference with the egress? I don't believe it
No.
will hear that it will.
It won't.
Okay. That was one thing I thought of as we were looking through this, but unfortunately that will not make a difference. Now, the Historic District Design Guidelines do say that garage doors, and that's the closest thing that we have to a civic building of this type, can be automated to open if they, it doesn't fundamentally change the appearance.
I just wanted to say that many of us were at the site visit. That was a long time ago, but the changes that have taken place in the design are significant, and it's obvious to me that you were paying attention to the many comments that we had, and it's just an enormous improvement, and I'm very pleased with how it looks.
Thank you.
I would ditto what Lisa's saying. I think it's a real minimal sensitive approach to an adaptive reuse of a building.
Yes.
I have one other comment. I echo that. I think y'all have done a knock it out of the park job on trying to get this adjusted to listen to all of our concerns, which I really appreciate. The one thing that I wonder, and I hesitate to even say it, is when we see those false the doors that are trying to hide that they're a door, I just wonder if it would look better if it was just a door. And I know that there'll probably be a lot of
That could
pushback
be.
on that, but sometimes when you try to hide, and we're the ones telling you to do it, like make minimal changes, but at some point, like, we gotta have life safety. Like, this is an adaptive reuse, and we all get that, or I get that, I think everybody else does. And so at some point, if we gotta have crash bars and get people out, is it gonna look less noticeable in the long run if it's just a door, as opposed to, why does that look weird? Why is why does the siding have this gap, this maybe close to an inch gap that you can't help and you can't fix? So that may be a little bit of a left turn from my perspective, but I think we see you trying, and you can only do what you can do.
It's a fair question, and we've kind of talked through that. I've thought about that myself. I still feel that this gets us where we want to be, but I think it's a fair point.
Yeah.
And maybe bring a drawing done both ways.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that to Brandon. I don't want to speak for Shahad, but she and I are going to be sharing this proposal with the Tennessee Historical Commission staff here this week. We don't know if we'll have an answer specifically, but I do know that the Historic Zoning Commission is keenly interested in what the state staff has to say, and frankly, the state staff has to approve it too. So that's one thing she and I will bring up, is whether or not we're trying too hard to make them, disappear. But we want to be cognizant of that existing fenestration opening and how we would broach that with the new doors. So we appreciate that, and depending on what they provide, we can certainly provide both options to you.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, the good news is this is the north and the south side.
Yes.
So this is not the front and the back where it is the main attraction and the main facade that everybody
Yes.
looks at in photographs. So that kind of helps us in a way.
sure.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, your egress width as you're calculating that is all about, whatever 0.2 inches per person. And so, to Josh's point, would it look better to have almost like a horse barn door that's maybe 4 feet wide that looks like an agrarian, like old
Yeah.
horse stall door?
I could see you trimming one and,
Yeah,
putting the.
and not trying to make it a hidden thing, because you can get your width, and we see wider doors on.
We can bring
Horse
this up
barns.
to the state historic
Yeah.
and see what they think about it, because we have two bodies that need to agree, so.
We're gonna arm wrestle.
You guys go ahead and do that.
Shot a
Amanda and I
referee.
will watch.
But knowing that you're flexible on that is something that makes me feel more comfortable having that discussion with the state. So thank you for bringing that up.
I have one quick question too to ask about. What is the approach for the siding? Because we had a lot of, update me on that.
So what we had proposed originally was to kind of preserve and maintain the front to the greatest extent, was going back and harvesting from other areas and using that on the front and then replacing in kind on the back. I don't know, so that was submitted to the state. I don't know if they specifically commented on if they had strong feelings one way or the other on that. I think that, if I'm being perfectly frank, I think the answer will be whatever they will, whatever they'll let us do. If we need to replace in kind, that's obviously, at most, we'll replace in kind. It'll be, same profile, size, width, all that. If the harvesting makes sense and is something that they're comfortable with, I could see there being I can see a case both ways. I could see, well, why would you pull some off and risk damaging it, just put it all back in kind? To me, that's part of that back and forth we'll have with them. Again,
I want to further explain what Brandon's saying. Replace in kind doesn't mean take it all off and put wood
No.
back.
No.
That's what
No, no,
replace
no.
in kind technically means, but what he means is that we will replace what is beyond repair in kind. And the idea that put some of the more aged wood on the front was one that our guidelines recommend to do. And so we will move forward with that, and if there's any objections by the state staff, we'll let you know. But I don't anticipate that being an issue at the state level.
thank you, that was an important clarification.
Are you conditioning the space?
There are pieces of it that will be conditioned, probably about 15 to 20%. We've got a warming kitchen, 2 restrooms, and then the women's lounge and Mr. Harlan's office. We'll be conditioning those spaces, but the large general space will not be conditioned.
Have we talked about where the equipment for that is located on the site?
There'll be a place on the back that'll be screened by landscaping, is where we're currently planning to set that. If you're looking at the floor plan, it's in I believe it was the bottom left-hand corner.
And
I'm sorry, upper right-hand corner. I get mine.
So you can see if you're looking at the bottom of the screen would be Franklin Road, and the back would be the Polo Arena. So you could see it here. To get us back on track a little bit, we're going to keep going around the sides here. So we've talked about the main barn doors, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've talked about adding a couple of egress doors here to meet the requirements of the fire marshal's office. And we've talked about how we are not putting the glass doors or proposing those anymore. We've talked about the wood siding. I'd like Brandon to go ahead and talk again about just briefly the comments that we've taken from the DRC and about the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so that is a very simple bracket that'll hang up. I don't know exactly, I haven't seen the exact product it'll be. Suffice to say, it'll be small as we can make it, and painted white. And the only time that you'll have that receiver up there is during events. For instance, this weekend that would be up there. And that's, again, for safety, to give them coverage of the whole area. There is an existing operable window. I think before I was incorrect in thinking we would have to put an operable window. As I understand, those are operable. We're putting a small little platform to the inside that you can pop it open, reach out, pull the Wi-Fi off, hang it inside, and then when you need the additional coverage, they hang it back on that bracket. So again, trying to keep the lightest touch we possibly can on all fronts.
And I believe that might be the extent of it. Is that correct, Brandon?
Since we were talking about the exterior materials, I think before we were going to just patch the roof. We're going to go ahead and replace the entire roof. In talking with Kevin Lindsay with the city, they've just had some issues. I think when they put it on, however long it's been, 10, 12 years ago, they had some adherence issues. So the idea is, well, if we're not sure it's going to give us the best protection, just replace the whole thing again. Obviously it's not original, so we're just putting back exactly what's there now. We'll find a color that'll match that. It won't look any different at all.
Our beloved asphalt roof in the Harlansdale Green will remain.
Yes.
And replaced in kind, truly. So that's such a unique feature of this barn. So we're excited that'll stay. Does anyone have any questions for Brandon?
I don't hear any. I
Okay.
think we're done.
Well, thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Looks great.
We're
Well,
very
But I'm here for the
excited.
next one too.
Off the subject, I've been at Harlansdale today, and y'all, the grass is extraordinary. It's amazing. It looks like carpet.
Just like your yard, Mary.
I was going to say, I wish
yeah.
my yard looked like carpet, but it does not, unfortunately.
All right,
it's just
we're ready for the next item. Discussion of alterations, principal structure of the Hayes House at 239 Franklin Road.
So to be a little reiterative, this too has a preservation covenant on it because we did accept some grant funding for the glorious restoration of these windows. Now, you can't see it. We've kept them covered out of abundance of caution, but once the building is starting to be touched more and there's more people on site, we plan to uncover those. But because of the covenant, this will be reviewed inside and out by the SHPO, and it will be reviewed exterior by you. So I'll turn it over to Brandon.
All right, so I guess I'll walk through the areas that we're proposing some changes. The primary pieces we're having to deal with are the stairs. And as far as I can tell, the wood stairs, both the one on the front, so if you're looking at this in the plan, that one, yes, I'm sorry. That is the front stair, and then there's a side stair, which was the one Amanda was highlighting a moment ago. Those aren't original to the house. They're frankly pretty nondescript wood stairs built out of, they work perfectly fine. But no decorative railings, none of that. They stand in some level of contrast to the porch itself. We were looking for images to see what was original there. I have not been able to find any to show, if there was any sort of decorative element on those. So first, again, life safety always being our first concern we start with. We want to replace these stairs with some wood stairs that'll, stand up. Some of these, they've deteriorated a little bit. They're all right. But we want to replace those and have a little more decorative railing, something that's more in keeping with the existing architecture. We're also, and I've got a note here, you can see there's the original pavers going up to the front entry. And then there's, really just quarter down in the front. We're proposing a patio there, again, to give a solid, durable surface. People are going to be stepping off onto that. We don't want to have any sort of fall or slip or anything like that. So we're proposing, as you can see in the site plan, building a patio, or not a patio, I'm sorry, a little landing piece that would match the width of the stair. It would be material-wise out of that same brick. I guess one question one piece I'd like to ask is pattern-wise, do we want to try to match, is kind of back to the discussion we had a little bit there a moment ago on the doors. Do we want to try to match what's there? Do we want to have a little different pattern that would clearly kind of demonstrate that's something that's been added later? Another piece we're proposing to the left, if you zoom out there a little bit, you can see on the site, again, to provide accessibility. There's an existing paved lot there now, and that's that West Tennessee mix. Again, no shiny gray concrete. We don't want that. We'll come back with that. This is roughly in the same area as now. It'll be a little bit more, and then, a little bit more area than what's currently paved, but that'll provide accessible parking and then a clear accessible route coming around and getting into the house. We had originally planned, if you see that blue area, we did have a walk there. We have decided, again, coming back to the light touch being the thing we're trying to use as guidance, do as little as possible. Pull that back. We're just going to restore that existing. There's a existing stone walk. We'll restore that, bring that up to allow that to provide an entry point to the side stair, which will also be repairing / replacing.
So Brandon, to clarify, this
Yes.
blue area this will be cut from the plan.
That's not, all I'm doing is highlighting the kind of where the rock is. We're not showing that.
Oh, okay, I
Yes.
misunderstood. So
That's
I'm
all right.
glad I asked. So there
Yeah.
won't be a connector there, like any sort of paved
Not a
area?
paved connector. It'll
Okay.
be, there's some existing pavers there we'll clean up. We may, if we are able to harvest some stone from other areas to, again, augment that, we'll do that. I guess to continue the discussion for the accessible route, you come up, we've got the walk along the driveway, and then you come towards the house, come around the back, and then once you get on the back, we'll transition to a ramp, and then I believe it's the last, if you look at the last sheet, I've got some, again, wanted to get some thoughts on kind of the best way to address that ramp. Now, it is on the rear of the building, so, it's as concealed from view as much as we can. My, design-wise, my kind of conflict question is, do I want to have balusters that are, would kind of match a little bit more what would have been there, or not what would have been there, but what's there, or do we want something that's going to visually start to go away? So as you can see, we've got the two examples. We've got the wood balusters to the left, and then a cable railing to the right. I know that's something I've seen, I believe at Fort Granger. They've got a walkway. They've done that. Obviously, architecturally, that's very different, but it also visually recedes. So again, I really wanted to ask thoughts on which felt the most appropriate. Do you want to have, because my concern with the wood is there's just a lot of it, right?
So the guidelines recommend that ramps be at rear elevations, which this is, and it does appear to be a lot. We understand that, simply stated, in order to get the requisite slope, this is what we have to do to tie to an accessible entrance at this back corner here. So the parking will be here, and then someone can travel up this ramp and get to an accessible entrance. So as proposed, that's where we're placing the ramp, which would meet the guidelines. But to Brandon's point, this feels really heavy. We know that three-dimensional drawings can feel a little heavy sometimes. But the guidelines would recommend that it be very simple, with simple square balusters as needed. We have approved as a commission cable before. This does seem a little bit more modern. And again, you're seeing it in a more modern context with non-painted wood that's not trimmed the way that you would see wood on this particular building. So we are asking, as the consultant's asking what the DRC would recommend here. The guidelines, and I apologize to you, I did ask that question, but I want to share one more thing. The guidelines would recommend simple, and I want to point out that on the front of the building, it is more ornate, so we are not asking to mimic what's on the front as far as the handrails or the porch, because that is in contrast with what the guidelines would recommend. This would be a simple rail like you see on this photograph here, if we were to go that route. The other route would be the cable. I promise I'll stop talking, Lisa.
No, Amanda, I agree with what you said about the cable looking modern, but at the same time, it does fade away, and it works very well at Fort Granger. I'm very familiar with that, that area. And in this case, I mean, there's no getting around the fact that the ramp has to be there, and for it to look a little bit contemporary is I think inevitable. Even if you used wood, it's still going to be modern, not quite to that degree, but I definitely think the cable fades. So
I would think that another possibility might to be look at something metal, iron, because it wouldn't have to have that modern feature of the cable, but could still get the job done with a lighter touch.
Amanda, can I see the plan, like where does the ramp connect to the building for accessibility?
So to give you some orientation, this is the front porch of the Hayes house, and then it wraps around. The drive comes in, and their parking's over here. So there's an entrance to the kitchen area at the rear and left side of the building. This will go around the back and come in on an existing entrance on the back right.
Okay. So ramp is the only solution, not a lift?
We had looked at that. The issue with the lift is it can break down. I think we want to be able to have something that, for accessibility, is going to provide consistent access that, that doesn't need a moving part or piece, doesn't need a button, isn't going to break down, doesn't need an operator. But we discussed that internally, and I think we felt like the ramp is overall the best long-term solution, the most reliable solution.
Susan, you got a question?
Yes, and I'm sure Tyler's familiar with this. The Fisk campus, the McKissick Library, they have a metal ramp that, a handicap ramp, and honestly, it tends to disappear. And I think it's probably one of the better ones I've seen, so I think looking at metal, as Mary suggested, might be a good option.
Where's that at again, the Fisk?
It's at Fisk campus. It's the library, what was originally a library done by McKissick. And you can probably tell them exactly where it is, but relative to what, Jubilee Hall?
Yeah, it's so there's actually two buildings. The theater has a railing and a ramp too, which is right across from Cravath Hall. So between Meharry and campus. And then that old library is actually behind the dining hall in the new contemporary sort of brutalist style dorm that's between Jubilee. But yeah.
Okay, I'll try to find some images of that.
Yeah,
to see it.
I think that the one that, there's the Cravat Library and then the McKissick Library, and that Bigelow did rather, but I think that, take a look at the one that
Okay.
Moses McKissick did, and just see
Yep.
if that doesn't give you some inspiration.
We have a photograph that we're going to share here in just a second.
So in the meantime, the concrete pad that you're talking about for the front, or is it
Not concrete pad, I'm
Concrete?
sorry. It would be pavers, similar to
Pavers.
the walk coming up to it.
Is that going to be bigger than the original or same size?
It will match the width of the entry stair, and then it'll, just the way it's configured, it'll be a little wider than the walk, but it will match the entry stair. If that answers your question.
Yes, yeah.
So this is a fire escape. I pulled up the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But this is the building, correct?
That's
Is
the
this the
old,
correct
that's the
building?
McKissick
That's the building.
Library, yeah.
Okay. So
Carnegie.
So it's on the other, obviously on the other side.
on the other side. I will get that.
Okay.
My
good.
apologies.
Thank you.
It might be later, but I will get that. And I will talk to Brandon about that. To Lisa's question here, this is where the landing's proposed. Brandon had asked for your feedback. So here's the existing conditions. You can see it's just an area that's gravel. They'd like to make that more.
Did you say it's gravel?
I believe it's gravel, correct?
Is it-
Yes.
Gravel, quarter, yeah.
Okay.
So Brandon, Lisa's question was, will this be the same, is the intent to keep the same size, or are you going smaller or larger with the pad?
Same size, right?
Yeah, we'll match the width of those entry stairs, and we won't come back any further. We won't touch any of the existing. Like, we'll obviously stop short of where the existing walk is.
So Lisa, it might square off this area where there's a
That's
little
right.
bit of grass, but
Correct.
it's not going to be any wider than the steps that you see here.
Okay.
But
It'll
your
come in
original
closer.
question, Brandon, was whether or not we would go along with the pattern that's in that walkway or do something else. Is that right? You're
Yes,
not
sir.
changing the walkway, right?
No, I'm not changing the
So I
walkway.
think that's what,
The question is, do I match that? I think it's like a chevron's not the right word, herringbone pattern. Do I match that, or do I do, a running pattern?
Make it look like it's part of the sidewalk.
Okay, perfect.
That's what I would. And you're just gonna put brick back on a gravel base, that's what you're.
Yes, sir.
So I think the question is that it might be difficult to do that, but we can certainly try to do that. And wanted to make sure that we understood as a city if that was something that would be expected by the commission or not. So your suggestion,
think-
Mr. Laster, is to try to weave it in the best way to match what's there currently?
I mean, it's on probably a gravel base currently or sand. I would think that would be easy to do, but
To match the detailing, the way that the bricks are laid?
Yeah, I think the
Okay.
issue's gonna be
matching the brick.
trying to match the brick.
That's what I
and-
mean.
Yeah, and I guess if the brick's a bad match, then, I mean, personally, not speaking for everybody else, I'd rather you picture frame it, and then you can do herringbone
Make a
inside
clean-
or something else.
make a
but just
clean
have
break, yeah.
a clean cut, because if it's toothed in and you have just a different color brick, it could look
And
a little.
that would be my suggestion. It would be that there is some sort of a soldier border or something that sets it off, and that way you can actually tell too that is a newer installation.
It could be a piece of stone too, it could be
Yeah.
a piece of granite or
Yeah, that's what,
whatever.
if you see now, it's lined. I mean, it's lined with stone,
do you think that's original to the house?
as far as I know. Again, we've only been able to find a few pictures, but
Yeah.
my understanding is it is. I believe Mr. Harlan was talking about that.
And you can find old brick, and you
Yeah.
can find, even handmade brick today that
Yep.
match. So,
Okay, who else got questions, comments? Anything else?
Was there more comments on the ramp?
I like the idea of the metal, if you can get something that works, and then whether cost justified, but I think the metal's gonna make that, it's gonna be less obtrusive than the wood.
When you say metal, I'm assuming that's like not quite a wrought iron, but like a black,
Yeah.
I mean, not a, it's obviously not galvanized, shiny, none of that.
No.
It's
No,
black, going away, okay.
And for an odd reason, I just had to find out. And actually, right now, I think the wrought iron is cheaper than the powder-coated metal.
No.
Go figure.
Not the plumbing pipes we see in that picture.
Well, I wanted us to make sure we covered everything. So Brandon, you want to talk about this page?
Yes. the plumbing pipes.
I like plumbing pipes
I do too,
personally.
but there's
built
gonna
a
be a
bookcase with
lot
some. They were
of
very
it, no reason. But
So, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Go
interrupt.
ahead, no.
No, we're just being funny. Sometimes simple is better. So sometimes it's nice to see some things that are simple, but we digress. We'll let you go back.
So I guess I'll use that as an opportunity for a larger discussion of this element. To place you in the building, this is the side entry. So if you're thinking of the main entry, this is to your left, and it connects to a corridor that connects to the main hall. So currently, you can see the condition the stairs are in. Now those are original stone, large stone treads. Unfortunately, again, always wanting to be mindful of life safety and providing a good, stable surface for people to walk on. What's there now doesn't fit that bill. What we're going to propose is to obviously track, record where those are, remove them, create a solid underlayment, some sort of a cast stair, that those will be able to be replaced and would have a long-term, they'd be long-term stable. I guess what I would ask is when we're looking at railings, two schools of thought again. One would be to come back with something similar to what we're doing on the front, where we've got a little bit more decorative sensibility to coincide with what's there, or we could come back with the simpler version of the pipe railing. I think we would probably need, I don't know that we could reuse what's there. I think we would need to install something new. We could certainly paint it, again, trying to respect the existing as much as we can. My gut, especially with that being on the side, would be to stick with the pipe.
Yeah.
But again, wanted to get thoughts, any feedback on that, if that feels like the direction that will be consistent with what you would expect.
I didn't mean for my mic to be on when I said, yeah, like that. So
I
we'll
can
hear
see
what
it
you
out
had
on
to
the
say.
corner.
So when you say stick with the pipe, what do you
Well, I guess
mean?
I should have said, come back with a
Metal
new
railing.
pipe. Yeah. Come back with a new pipe that would be minimal, similar to what's there now.
Oh,
But we're going to need a new pipe, because the way that's going to,
Sure.
when we reconfigure the stair, you've got to have railing heights, and
Yeah,
you've got to have
yeah.
extensions, so we won't be able to reuse the existing,
Certainly,
but we
uh-huh.
can put something back that's similar.
Yeah, that sounds good, and you said something referring to the front, which has more of an intricate, or I don't know what word you used, but the railing, I don't think needs to be intricate, or, I mean, the simpler the better, I guess
So-
is what I mean.
So we've got an image on, I guess it's the image on that last sheet again. Well, where is that? Sorry. It's the image on the same sheet as the ramp, and it's got kind of what our thinking to the left, middle left. There, that, right there. So that was my thinking as far as, I wouldn't want it to be too intricate. I do think it's the front and some level of articulation there, but this was an image I looked at and was thinking would use to kind of guide that design. I guess, does that feel appropriate?
For the front,
Yes, ma'am.
it does, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
So when he says the front, I just want to make sure everyone understands, we're talking about, I'm going to go back to the floor plan,
Yes, thank you.
or the site plan. We're talking about this entrance here.
Well, no, I'm sorry.
No.
That entrance.
So this is the
Main
front
entrance.
facade.
That's the front, yes.
We're keeping the railing that we have there.
Well, what we're proposing is redoing that stair and railing, because they're not original. I guess that was my question, is do we want to come back with something that's a little more articulated to keep keeping the spirit of what's on the front?
So I think there's some confusion. Let's go entrance by entrance and just go around.
Could we just take a quick break, Mr. Chair? I hate to do that, but I want to listen to this.
Okay,
and-
that's fine. We need to,
We'll be back by
let's take 5 minutes. What?
5 minutes.
6:45 p.m.
6:45, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're having a change of guard here. We have with us Mike Hathaway from 9622 Architects, and we still have Shahad here with the engineering team. So what we decided to do, just to mitigate some confusion, is we're gonna go entrance by entrance and talk about those changes on each facade, if that works for you, Mr. Chair. Okay.
That's fine.
And I could share the screen, that might help too. Okay. All right, Mike, where do you want to start?
We start at the front.
Yes.
I
Just
think our,
make sure your mic's on. Push the button. It is,
The green button?
Yeah. Green go.
Can you hear me now?
yes, sir.
All right, thank you, guys. So I think we were just asking for feedback. You know, there's several ways we can approach the front entrance. We can replace in kind as it is today, or we can find a more decorative. I think we're struggling with finding images that we could just match exactly what's there. I think there was one that was going to be a great image, and then there was a horse right in front of it. So, you know, what do you do? Historically, we can't move the horse out of the image. But we're just looking for some feedback on any consideration you guys would offer for how to address that front entrance stair.
How high is that porch?
I don't know. I mean, if I'm looking at these images,
Are we under that 30-inch
Porch
mark?
house 7.
4 stairs up, so it's pretty close to the 30 inches.
So you'll have to do a railing?
We are not proposing a railing, just handrails.
Oh.
It didn't historically have
Yeah, I
that.
felt like the inspiration image looked really heavy and gingerbready to me as compared to this. That was my reaction to it.
There's just a handrail, not a guardrail,
Right.
is what's proposed for the stairs. That's what you're saying. Okay. Well, that's what I was getting at, because the images we've seen are all of the above,
Right.
which is just a lot for the front of this house.
So I think to our consultant's request is, would the DRC recommend looking at a historically typical style? Like find another house that's comparable in age and style to this one and try to replicate a railing that would be what we would have surmised to have been, you know, potentially appropriate, or go back with something that's not bare bones, but something that has a little bit more substance to it, given that this is a front facade. The design guidelines would recommend that you maintain original configurations, of course. We know that this is not an original railing, so we would want it to be something that pays homage to the architectural style to some degree, but is not so duplicative that someone would think that was original to the building, a layman coming across it and looking at it. So that's what the guidelines would recommend. Do you have any comments?
Are there any renderings of ideas in terms of,
Yeah, we just provided you images. We don't have any specific renderings to say this is what we propose.
And we don't have a historic picture.
That's right.
That's the proposal, or that was the rendering I was saying looked pretty heavy to me.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, you know, the house is fairly decidedly Victorian in terms of there is some sort of gingerbreading happening. In the image that we see, it's dense, but it's like, that to me is a lot of Home Depot parts. I mean, it is. I
Exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
look at it. And I think that's what's, I mean, when I just Googled Victorian historic railings, and a lot of them were really heavy pieces, but a lot less of them.
Yes.
So I have all the confidence in the world that you can find something that's appropriate. And I say that to say that, you know, maybe it needs to be a replication of the bottom part of the columns is just a bottom newel and a board between it
Yeah.
with an apron, something simple, but it just fits and doesn't want to draw attention to itself. I think the Home Depot image is so decidedly different that it just didn't fit right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know it was just you were trying to find something that,
Yeah, we couldn't find an image that was exactly.
yeah.
Something
Right.
that kind of gave an idea of weight. I think your comment is very well taken to look at the existing columns and maybe that be the decorative aspect and then everything else be very sleek and subtle on the actual handrail itself.
But your suggestion too of looking to see what was in Franklin, we have tons of photographs
Absolutely.
of
Yeah.
houses all over
Unfortunately,
the
not
place.
this one.
No, but what I found is a lot of the elements that are on porches have been repeated on houses over and over in different configurations. So, I mean, it'd be probably fairly simple to find something similar.
Okay. And
Real-
again, we do have to get this approved by the SHPO, so we will seek staff's feedback at that office as well, but of course, your feedback is just as important. So as we start putting together a proposal for the SHPO, we wanted your feedback on how to even draw something to bring forward.
Well, I think what Tyler said about looking at the existing post as the weight of it is good.
Anything?
Anything, any other comments on this one?
I would
Susan?
concur, and I think I mean, this is one of those where if you had to go to someone that had to make it custom, it's not that many of them, that wouldn't be a huge expense.
Right.
And I think that's gonna be our best option.
Yeah, especially with this being the entrance to the building.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're gonna go on to stair number 2. Stair number 2 is on the right facade near the front. You see the photograph here. So this is the side entrance to the wraparound porch. Again, this is
Existing.
the existing conditions where it's not a railing that would have been there historically. I'm not sure if the building ever had handrails. It may have, it may not have. Would you recommend that the same treatment for the front be considered for the secondary access to this wraparound porch?
Yes, that's the same posts.
Okay,
That's
and-
my opinion.
Yeah, and the difference here is, I think based on the plan versus the pictures, you're gonna add a riser, which it looks like it needs another one. Is that a true
Right.
story?
Probably so, yeah.
Which means it's probably over the 30 inches. So it's like, are we gonna add pickets on this one?
This is the
I know
same
you
porch.
think you're exempt.
we are exempt.
Yeah, which is.
I will
but-
ensure it.
But, you know, when
We
cities
won't
get it.
touch the railings if we have to add a rail.
Well, I'm cognizant that cities are extra careful because people love to sue municipalities. So I just want to be thoughtful. If it had to be something with pickets here, then it'd just be on the stair and. but-
Well, to your point, I don't know if we have to add a guardrail, but we will, I mean, we're not planning to add a guardrail, and I'm speaking for myself here, I'm not speaking for the team. I would much rather not even alter the steps at all than to add a guardrail. Like
Sure.
if altering this porch triggers a guardrail, we're not likely to alter the porch. That would be such a significant change to this building, but, are you talking about the handrail and then
Just the stair.
just the stair?
So
Okay.
you know, the porch isn't getting rebuilt, so most of the time it doesn't trigger, okay, now we need to put in rails all the way around the porch. At the stair, since that carriage, the stair carriage is being rebuilt, sometimes codes might make you
Yeah.
put in a guardrail
Mhm.
just in that stair section, but
I see.
most,
Okay.
most historic municipalities just kind of.
That's not typically, it's not my understanding that will be required. Again, if that is required, it's certainly something the commission has to approve. And for my end, I would recommend against a guardrail if we can avoid it.
Yeah.
Can you flip to page 6? Mine shows something different on 6 of 7. You're on 7, I think.
There you go.
Is this the
And-
correct page? I was just looking at the numbers here.
Yeah, well, I don't know. See, the one, it shows the side porch with the steps we were just talking about, except you can see them, the entire porch length.
Now, I do have mine zoomed in quite a bit, so let's see.
It's at the bottom there.
Is this the correct page or no?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's at the bottom.
Bottom
Yeah, it
center
is.
image.
Okay.
The
I'm trying to
bottom-
keep it zoomed in so that the public can see as we go
Bottom
along.
third image, right there.
Okay.
So I have a question about the porch posts. It looks like they're boxed. They're boxed on the bottoms. Is that because of rot? Or is that an original feature? Usually you wouldn't see that on a porch post.
Yeah, the bottom rail for balancers died too, it's boxed.
Or they could have been rotted on the bottom and that's how someone chose to repair it.
That was my thought when you first asked that question. Ms. Clayton, do you happen to know if those railings were altered at all after the city acquired the property? So what they're talking about is this boxed area at the bottom of each column. Those were added. Okay, and that was, do you know why they were added?
My understanding it was right.
Okay, so that's it. Okay.
Now,
No
I
rail.
don't know that every one of them was right, but there were some right determinants.
Okay, so Brian, that's a great thing to bring up. So, what would your suggestion be here? Was the intent, Mike, to keep the columns as is, or would we be repairing the columns?
I think as far as I understand, that was the intent to keep them as is.
Personally, I'd love to see them repaired.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the ideal part to do.
Not like fully replaced, just repaired at the base.
At the base.
Cut and
That's right.
spliced in.
And in some, if they weren't that serious, Arbitron, I think, makes a liquid wood product that they use at historic homes all the time to fill in rotten wood.
Okay, any other questions on stair number 2? Okay, so we're moving on to stair number 3. Stair number 3 is at the back right corner, and the photograph is on the bottom right here. This is this guy right here. So, Mike, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I think we are suggesting to replace that. And that's where it came into that discussion about the wire rail versus the pickets.
So this does tie, that's a good point. So this is the accessible entrance as proposed. And so this is where the ramp would tie into.
Right.
This is a location on the building that was an addition. I believe that, and let me get my bearings. Is this the location, Tori, of the infield porch? Yes, okay. So an area that used to be a porch that was infilled. So this, all that to say that these steps are older, but they're not original. This is an area of the house that was, well, they could be. The porch was infilled, so I'm not sure if those were original or not.
But this is the one we've already talked about that's going to become part of the ramp, correct?
Yes, so
We've
the
covered that,
proposal is
yes.
to remove all of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about that? Okay.
Well, it does appear to be cinder block as a base and then the stairs. Is that right on that?
I think that's right.
The stairs look,
They may be concrete.
yes, that's why I'm pausing, because I've never looked at it quite from this angle before on site. Okay, so going to stair number 4, that is going to be back here. This is the back left. So this is the access that goes into the kitchen area for those of you who are familiar with the inside of the house. You can see that photograph here. So this is proposed to be replaced, and do you want to speak to that?
I would love to. Let me catch up real quick.
These are original stairs.
rock climbing.
These are the steps that Brandon was saying. He would create a base and reset those same steps on top, or try as best as we can. Right now, the width of them is not appropriate, it's not safe. So we'll do our best to reset these.
Because they're stone, right?
They're original.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the one, is this the one? No, we talked about the one with the pipe handrail, but that was,
Yeah, that's got
that's a
stone
different
as
set.
well.
That's down from there.
Both have the same note.
So let me show you so you can understand where this is. This is, again, this is the front porch. This is back where the parking is. So this will likely be a regular entrance point for those using the building. The ADA access will come off of that landing for the stairs and go around. So your parking, this leads to your parking, which will be over here.
But you were saying on these steps and the others you showed us with stone, you're gonna try to work those stones into?
For specifically these ones, we were gonna try to reuse the same steps. We'll do our best to do that, but right now they're kind of crumbling and the width is not appropriate and it's not safe. If you use those steps right now, you would feel, you need to watch your step very carefully.
Yeah, if you can find a place to reuse them, whether here or somewhere else, that'd be good.
Yeah.
I understand from friends that they would like to keep these and reuse somewhere on the site, regardless of if we're able to use them here or not. So
Yeah.
they will not be thrown away. They will be salvaged on the site for
Definitely.
some use. Correct? Okay.
Good.
I really am happy to hear that as well. These, I understand both concerns, and we certainly want to keep every element we can, and it maybe just adaptively reusing them for something else.
And since the handrail, since this is on the exact same side as the other set that we just talked about, or we first talked about, are we gonna do a similar handrail there? Is that the proposal?
I think it would make sense.
That seems,
It would be consistent.
yeah.
So that, you're talking, Josh, about stair number 5
Yep.
with the
That one we
existing
talked
with the pipe rail. Is there any reason, Mike, that this stair 4 would have to have anything more substantive than a pipe rail?
You know, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit behind what Brandon knows about this, but we just need to understand if that's required by code. So we'll look into that as we get more detail.
See, my thought is that because it's steeper, that it might need something underneath the pipe rail, because you wouldn't want someone to fall.
Are you talking about a guardrail?
Yes, a guardrail on a handrail.
Mhm.
When I say guardrail, usually what people say guardrail to me to mean is an actual
Full panel, yeah.
just railing on a porch.
Right, right.
So a guardrail on the handrail might be necessary.
Yeah.
Not a guard handrail.
Yeah, what
Not a
I'd
guard
say
handrail.
too, we're talking about, we've got the wood porch, wood steps on one part of the house. The other part of the house is stone, like masonry. Typically, this is just my experience, could be wrong, typically wood porches had wood rails. Very seldom see metal anything on wood porches.
Right.
Seen it, and you usually see it and go, that wasn't there originally. And then masonry, we very seldom see wood on because it rots. You typically see an iron rail. And so do what you will with that information, but the most appropriate thing, historically speaking, would be wood near the wood and iron rails on the two stone/concrete steps.
Okay. Does everyone feel comfortable with that? Just
Yes.
very simple? Okay. And that would be the same for stair 5, as you can see here. Mike, are there any other changes proposed that we need to discuss today?
I think so. Most of the comments had to do with access, so I think that's the majority of it.
I do want to talk about the lattice work underneath the porch. I do think that's important. So right now, the porch is open. And I don't know if this is a requirement or a desire of the group we're working with to enclose it with lattice. Now, the photograph here is a framed lattice. This lattice is on a horizontal, which would not be recommended. If lattice is recommended to enclose, crawl spaces, it's generally recommended that it be something like this that's not on a diagonal like you see here in this photograph, but larger scale. Does anyone have any questions, comments about that, feelings one way or the other? I don't think either of these examples really show what
Can we
what
go
we'll
back
go
to the front elevation? Where it would
Absolutely.
be affected?
Do you need something there? Is that the reason? Is it
There's
necessary?
concern about critters and other things
Critters.
getting underneath.
Animals.
Yeah, skunks,
They get in.
groundhogs,
They do.
possums, and
Few of those
dogs.
around.
Yes. I can go through a full list of
Yeah.
children under my house.
Me too.
So is this house going to be, is it conditioned?
it will be.
It will be. And your ductwork's going to have to go under the house, right?
You talking about conditioned crawl space?
Yeah, like air conditioning, heating, air conditioning.
Inside the house?
Yeah.
Where would the units go?
Where to go? The units, and then you're going to have ductwork is underneath the house, right?
That's right.
But-
You need at least lattice work.
Well, I'm assuming, and it may not, but I'm assuming that there is a solid stone foundation at the seal of the house that goes around, and it's just the porch that's open
It's just the porch that's open.
underneath.
So the ductwork wouldn't be exposed to those areas.
So they're just talking about under the porch.
Okay.
There's no intent for the ductwork to be under the porch, no.
I don't have a problem with the lattice.
I don't have a problem with the lattice, but
Yeah. It's.
as long as nothing can get underneath the house.
Yeah. I don't, I like the way it is now, but I understand the necessity
I do
and
too.
the reversibility of lattice in the future is,
Great.
15 minutes of work. It's
True.
not
Yeah.
that big a deal.
Right.
So, if it helps the folks who are gonna run this facility maintain it, then I'm all about that.
So to give some feedback on that design,
That's fine. Looks nice.
Well,
staff would not
that.
recommend the
No.
horizontal. This almost seems too small, but I want to get feedback from the DRC.
Did you say staff doesn't recommend the horizontal?
Do you mean the diagonal?
The diagonal.
I
I
don't
mean the
recommend the
diagonal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I think what you're
I would
saying is
recommend the
that's,
horizontal.
that's prefabricated.
Yes.
And it needs to be, built to.
What I call
fit
the
that-
hashtag.
Right.
The hashtag, yeah.
It needs to be built, on site or whatever, so.
And I think if we can recess it as far back away from the front
Get that
piers
reveal.
as we can,
That
and
makes
and have it a
sense,
dark
yeah.
color, it'll pretty much go away.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was the last thing. I'm gonna double check.
Where are the units gonna go for the HVAC, the condensers? Under that giant
I don't-
ramp?
I don't know that answer. Yeah, there is a huge backyard that probably would make sense, and
See, that, I believed I understood that, but I didn't want to speak out of turn. We understand that most of that's going to be in the basement.
Well, the condensers can't be in the basement.
Right.
They'll have to be on the back.
Yeah.
So maybe, if I'm making sure, if I'm, probably behind where the ADA accessibility, where something you can hide back there. But
That would be good to show when it comes to the board.
Yes, and we'll make sure that's prepared because we'll want to show that to the SHPO as well. But just to make sure that everyone heard, Ms. Clayton in the audience has stated that the condensers would be screened at the back. And we'll definitely need that to be part of the submittal. Any other questions, comments?
So
So you're
just
going to have one,
exciting.
excuse me, you're going to have one HVAC unit for that whole house? Two?
well, I'm sure
You
there's
gonna-
more than one.
Both, everything will be outside though? Your
No,
units? Or are you going to have one in the attic?
The units themselves will be in the basement, The condensers will be in the rear, down by the
Okay,
ADA
all right, in the,
ramp.
okay, in the basement.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're using the attic space for our offices, and we're remodeling that, so we don't
Okay.
have room.
So Tori's gonna be in the attic.
There's a nice spot.
It's a very
not
nice,
bad,
it's
yeah.
a nice upper floor. Okay, so we are going to move on, and unless there's any other business, I don't want to preempt our chair here, but,
No, roll on.
okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mike.
And Lisa, we thank you so much for hanging with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tori.
Bye, Tori.
Okay, alterations principal structure at 1368 Eastern Flank Circle, City of Franklin.
You want me to just go
You
ahead?
got any comments, Amanda?
I don't. I just want, we wanted to respect the request of the Historic Zoning Commission last week to have a brief discussion on the progress at this site. We have with us Lisa Clayton, the Director of the Parks Department. I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Amanda and
Thank you.
Chairman. Thank you, and Commissioners, thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for letting it be Parks Night at the Historic Zoning Commission. I don't get that very often, sometimes at the board level. I come before you tonight, I designed, laid out everything I wanted to say before you, and it is 7:15, and I know I'm between you and supper. I owe you an apology. I wouldn't be here tonight if I thought by any means that it was just the city or that type thing. Eastern Flank is a very important piece of property, as well as you've had discussions at Harlansdale and Collins Farm and Fort Granger, and
Amazing.
I wouldn't, it was brought to my attention about a week and a half ago, and I wanted to be able to come before you this evening to tell you that I am so sorry to not bring this particular project before you, but I wanted to give you some context to the reason why. This project, this property, Eastern Flank, is 110 acres, and it came under my leadership. I've been here 21 years, and in 2006 when we purchased that property. And it was not part of the historic overlay. I think I've shared, you've been here for 3 hours with a lot of my stuff. I bring everything before you. And I've changed. You know, I'm so glad we can laugh a little bit about it now, because the last couple of weeks has been a little hard. I missed it. It was, we've made a lot of changes to that building over the years. I mean, lots of changes, from colors, some of the windows, from awnings, the roof, you name it. We've taken away buildings that were part of the golf course. And Amanda, let me step back. In 2018, so that you understand, I take a budget before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and I have to submit one in the December of every year. By 2018, that project, as part of Eastern Flank, the renovations, was part of that budget. And on February the 14th, I went before the Budget and Finance Committee and proposed that budget, and by July, it was approved. Our plans were to go ahead and bid it out, but it was during that somewhere in that year, planning was going through Planning Palooza. They came to me, it was not about just the structure. Lisa, would you consider that we part of the zoning update, historic overlays and everything, would you consider let's just make that part of several of the historic parks that were not included? And I said, of course, but it just didn't occur to me at that time, because I'm not part of that full process. I try to watch every process in the city. I really do, but I missed it. And the only reason that project, it was approved by BOMA on December the 12th, 2019. And I would have already bid that project out, but I had 4 weddings at Eastern Flank, plus the Heritage Ball. all the way through to December. I rent that facility. It's a revenue source for our community. So I knew that we weren't going to, I needed 4 months to keep it closed. And so I knew I couldn't do that, so 2020 was on our mind. I was taking a parkland impact fee ordinance through the process as well. It never occurred to me to come back to planning and say, hey, what exactly did pass? So by March, I closed the park system down to COVID. And for the next year and a half, we didn't do anything. And so going back and reminding myself to my colleagues and asking where is it? I just didn't. Now, I didn't do these renovations in the dark. We bid this project 3 times. It's gone to Board of Mayor and Alderman 6 times. I have gone before. I tried to look at what the Fleming Center and those specifications. We wrote those specifications as closely as what we do with all of our projects. And some of the things, just because, so that you know, that original project was $250. When we bid it out, it was $450. And I had to make certain changes in the last couple of months. One of the changes that came before was removing a window, which was a sliding glass window on the south side of the building. And so it was a sliding glass door that was used by the former clubhouse. That was one of the areas that's removed. Stucco cannot be, so we went back with trying to match a little bit of what Carton and the Fleming Center has done, and those things were in there. Even in our specifications, we made sure that it would be a pre-painted hardy plank heather moss. We were trying to match the Fleming Center. And by our contractors, I mean, we have documentation. We were doing our best. We waited over 3 weeks. It was 16 weeks in order to get the couple of windows that we needed. It was 9 weeks on the Hardy board, and it was the James Hardy Color Plus, and they were not making it. It was a 10-month to 12-month out. So the only thing they were making, and they came back to us and said, it's 8.25 smooth lap siding. Because we knew that at least the boards of it looking like wood would not go through. And so forgive me for not knowing the name of that. There's a weather type.
So what Lisa's referring to is the smooth side versus the wood embossed side
Yes,
of a
thank you.
fiber cement board. So she had the foresight to order. She made the decision. It would have been the decision I made, where we would have gone with a smooth side out as opposed to a tighter reveal.
So what we had in the specs was do a 6.25 inch to show a 5 inch reveal, but what we were only able to receive without keeping the facility closed was an 8.2 smooth siding, lap siding with a 7. And I know that's normally not what you do. But I would have had to keep it closed. And I've got the Heritage Ball in 2 weeks. It's not something simple to change because we booked those a year in advance. And so even the colors, they could not get the color in. We did have black on the property. We had white. We didn't change any of those things. The awnings going back up black. We did have over 9 areas on the roof that had to be replaced. We could not match the shingles that were there, and it was a brown in color. So we went ahead and came before and did a change order to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and it went back with the black, what you see before you. What will go back in as far as landscaping will be very simple. In fact, Brian Walker has stayed with me tonight. I owe him lunch. And because it will be his design that will go back in. And if you know any of his designs, that's what's all over that property. But he also understands of how to be simple and not, because normally what you saw before, if you could go back a couple, is that was the original, and we've just tweaked that landscaping over time. That's the back of the building, and that was the front. So I come before you as I'm here to answer any questions you may have, but I really wanted to make sure that I apologized.
And to add to Lisa's comment, again, we'd asked as planning to include these sites into the HPO, and that took place December 2019. This was already in the pipeline, and there was just a disconnect. I didn't think to ask, and the foundation that you see here is the foundation that is already there. You just, I believe, correct?
Yes, no,
Yeah,
we didn't
it's-
touch the foundation.
It's just that you're not used to seeing it in this capacity because you're used to seeing landscaping. Brian is the urban forestry superintendent, has a vast knowledge of how to pursue this in a very simple and effective way. Because, this foundation level is not built to what, we would request for infill buildings in a historic district, but we inherited this building, and I'm glad we kept it. It served a great purpose for our community, and Lisa's done a fantastic job trying to take into account the things that the Historic Zoning Commission would have considered even if it wasn't in the historic district. So we have such great teams and colleagues here, and I want to tell her that she did a great job picking the battles she needed to pick in terms of, which considerations are more important than others. So I'm glad she's here. I thank her for coming here to speak, and I'm sure she's open to any questions you may have.
Okay, has anybody got any questions?
I do.
Fire.
Not questions. And I just want to say that I think the Parks Department's fantastic. I've been with Lisa since day one for
21 years. We were
Good
very
Lord.
young.
Good Lord. Anyway, and what she's brought to the city is amazing, so I hate to see you apologize. I'll just say that, because I know that nothing's ever done with intent. I worked hard on this acquisition. It was a community effort. We almost had trouble getting some grant funding because this building was going to stay. I'm too glad it stayed. I think it's a great community resource. In my dreams, and I probably should have said it to you sometime, I would have loved to have seen it be a color that took it down. I think the black awnings, everything y'all have done across the back's amazing. The landscaping's amazing in the back. So maybe in 20 more years or whenever, Lisa, we could pick a color. I even think the trim color would make a difference because this needs to look like a park facility. It needs to me, to go down, fade into the landscape as much as possible. But
Thank you.
that's all I have to say. I'm glad we kept it.
Anybody else?
So what are we being asked?
We're not.
We're not.
She's just,
We're not.
no.
It's done.
It was,
This
his-
is-
No.
it was in historic overlay zoning. It's the one thing that I ever know she missed. And so she's just, I think Lisa's just trying to be forthright and
That-
communicative.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And I'm trying to be the same.
Yeah.
By saying, not the color I would have picked, would love to see the trim darker.
I'd like to interject. So we ask if we would like to get this like a retroactive COA. When I can work with Lisa and her team on that, bringing that forward. Any changes in the future would certainly be brought
Yeah.
forward to this commission to consider.
Well, I think it'd be good, can you just highlight what's been actually done? You've changed the skin of the building, you've changed the roof, you redid the roof.
Just redid the roof. the
And did
shingles.
you change the entrance into the clubhouse or the building?
No, sir. The railings were taken down, but they will be put back up.
Okay.
So none of, like I
So-
said, one window was replaced, the dormers were, the flashing was redone.
They were there.
But everything else stayed the same.
The
It was just
footprint's
the
the
exterior.
same.
The footprint is completely the same.
All right, and the accessory building that's over to the left?
That is our public restroom. That was for the pool house restroom.
And that's
Right.
being reskinned to.
It's to
Yeah.
match exactly the clubhouse.
What
Okay.
will the columns be on that?
Just the siding straight.
Okay.
Same look.
So, I mean, that's the change.
Is
And
that
that's
something
And
that,
the roofing material, I mean, the color, I'm like, yay.
Well, I did hear that, but the goal was to leave it because it was not in the budget,
Yeah.
but we did come back, because you can see it was brown, but where they had originally had a kitchen in that facility, and so all
Right.
those vent stacks, did nothing but leak water. And so over the years, we've had to mitigate mold in that facility.
So
And so we've changed, a couple of those vent stacks were removed on the front and only allowed what is left.
So the only changes are the vent stacks that were removed, which would have been entirely appropriate to do, replacing one window and the siding material, the faux stucco being covered with lap siding.
And it's a non-contributing building.
It is.
Yeah.
I think all these changes would have been approved.
I agree, and we really don't control color.
That's right.
But I know how Lisa is,
Well, I like
and
to
if that had come forward, she would have certainly taken our comments on that.
So my question is, and first of all, thank you so much for your candor. I know it's not easy
Yeah.
to do what you just did, and it means a lot, and it goes so far, and so I personally just appreciate that. Do we need to bless this at the next meeting as we would have
Yes.
if the application, because I know we have other folks in the community who occasionally innocently
Yeah.
miss that the guidelines apply or what have you, and my recollection is they do have to come before and
Yes.
get those approved.
So that's what I mentioned, that we are going to ask for a retroactive COA. We will bring forward an application that you would see typically. We are treating this like we would any other project in that respect, like you noted. I do feel, just reading the guidelines, I cannot provide a recommendation formally, but I did tell Lisa that I feel like everything that has been changed would have been something that would have been supported by the commission anyway in light of the guidelines. And so I will work on that with Lisa and bring an application to you to consider for the October meeting. But this is our way of explaining what happened, and I hope that you can appreciate that getting mixed up in the grand scheme of things going on. She's handling, how many parks is it now?
We have 18. We have 1,000 acres.
And you all, Lisa, while we've got her here, has changed the face of Franklin. If you all knew what the park program was prior to Lisa and after, it is completely changed it. So there's a deep appreciation for you.
Thank you. And I'm more humbled right now, so. But you know what?
You're
That's-
not allowed to leave.
No. But I will share with you, it was a growing opportunity for internal conversations of my team. They're so involved in other things, and Kelly and Amanda and I've had those conversations. And so it goes further than this meeting. And so I appreciate your allowing me, commissioners and chairman, to allow me to speak to you today.
You're welcome. How close are you to finishing it out there?
10 days, that's all she's got.
That's all I got. Yes.
10 days?
10 days.
Yeah.
10 days.
But you're
10
close.
days.
You're
I am
close.
very close. The Heritage Ball is going on.
I
rain or
understand
shine.
that.
But Lisa's finished.
But you got good weather projected.
We do. We've got some dry weather, and then landscaping will go in appropriately this fall.
And for the record, I think it looks great. Yep. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
It does. And as Lisa said, I don't want to keep you any further, but we've been here most of the evening talking about the projects we have all been working on together. And so that goes a long way, and we'll bring all those back to you at some point as we're ready. So without
All right.
any other,
Move to adjourn. Anybody?
so moved.
Second.
Second. Done.
Thank you.
All in favor, stand as you're.